Chapter 733. He was a heaven illuminator from the spirit race, and was known as the spirit ancestor. He had experienced the era when the divine blood banner wreaked havoc in the world. At that time, the spirit race was extremely powerful and invincible. In the end, even the 10 greats couldn't sit still anymore. They suppressed that peerless secret treasure and forcefully dismantled it to prevent that terrifying ultimate killing weapon from appearing in the world again. Now, the spirit ancestor who had experienced that era had come out. Although he wasn't the one who personally controlled the legendary blood transformation banner back then, he was a notorious person in ancient times who had surrounded and hunted down Yao Yao's father. As soon as he appeared, he announced that he would kill Yao Yao's grandfather and join hands with the great deity to eradicate the Earth's last path of fortune. In the end, he was almost knocked over. His back was in intense pain, his bones were cracked, and his spine was fractured. How terrifying was the star-studded whip! With this weapon, the Sage Master could catch up to the stars in the heavens, set up domains, and set up killing traps. Even heaven illuminators were helpless against him back then. Not to mention that the Sage Master had also stepped into this realm. Especially this time, he had taken the first crucial step and stood in this domain. He was completely stable and no longer as weak as before. He had obtained a life-prolonging item from the broken universe in the primal chaos. All of this happened in an instant. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the spirit ancestor's back was cracked, his body was covered in blood, and he was sent flying. Up until now, the battle was continuous and still ongoing. Swoosh! The Sage Master didn't stop and disappeared once again. With a bang, he appeared behind the spirit ancestor and brandished the star-studded whip once again before the latter could turn around. What kind of character was the spirit ancestor? He had walked through many eras since the beginning of time. His divine instincts were incomparably sharp, and he immediately propped up nomological runes to protect himself. However, the Sage Master didn't stop there. He had used the star-studded whip to set up domains and set up a trump card while rushing over. One could see the stars in the heavens converging with brilliance. The Big Dipper was like the eye of the starry sky as it drew in the boundless power of starlight. With a boom, it passed through the handle of the ladle and attacked with a murderous light. This was just a cluster of stars. At this moment, the boundless starlight spread in the other regions. In some places, the starry river was used as a bowstring and a cosmic bow was drawn, shooting out beams of energy to attack this place. This kind of domain technique shook the world. Thus, the starlight that filled the sky might not be enough to injure someone of this level, but when it was endless and concentrated, the energy was terrifying. The Spirit Patriarch's protective barrier was pierced through, and its runes were obliterated. Then, the star-studded whip descended once more. Puff! As blood splattered everywhere, the spirit ancestor let out a muffled groan and staggered backward. The star-studded whip struck the spirit ancestor's body repeatedly. This scene was simply unbelievable. The Spirit Patriarch was actually being beaten up. Stellar radiance pervaded the air, the skies becoming the battlefield. The stars in the heavens were arranged into formations, turning into weapons. Some of the stars formed spears that emitted dazzling radiance as they pierced over, some of the stars formed heavenly blades that hacked across the sky, and some of the stars formed a great furnace that suppressed downwards. The endless stars turned into magnets. They transformed into domains and shot out all types of energy weapons to attack forward. This kind of magnificent scene made the people from outer space petrified. Then, they felt a chill run down their back. As for the Spirit Patriarch on the battlefield, there was no need to talk about him. He was suddenly ambushed and immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. Then, he had no time to retaliate and was being suppressed. This was the first time the Sage Master had taken the initiative since his return. He laid down an inescapable net to trap the Spirit Patriarch and almost hacked him to death on the spot. The spirit patriarch's current mood was obvious. He wanted to curse out loud. He was too passive. He was trapped in a domain just like that and was being suppressed. He wasn't a masochist and didn't have that kind of hobby. But now, his bones and tendons were broken, his back was about to break, and his flesh was rotting away. He was going crazy. How preposterous! Additionally, he was furious that they had made a huge blunder this time. They had mustered a large force to surround the Sage Master, but in the end, they didn't manage to stop him. Instead, the other party had sneaked into the rear and ambushed him. They had prepared Heaven Illuminator Divine Eyes and the fiery eyes they had left behind in the past. They could practically see through the primal chaos and should have been able to monitor the Sage Master's movements immediately. But he had been killed right under their noses. The Spirit Patriarch was furious. He swung the banner in his hand and was finally able to move again. He was no longer confined, but he found that his spine had been broken and he had almost been cut in half at the waist. The star-studded whip was too sharp. Now that it had evolved along with the Sage Master, it had reached the Heaven Illuminator level. Boom! Fortunately, Wei Shilin moved at the critical moment. The commander of the Shilin army, who had betrayed ancient Earth, had long since risen to power and become a powerhouse of a region. With a raise of his hand, he scattered the order of the starry skies and interfered with the Sage Master's domain. The Spirit Patriarch went all out and used this opportunity to break free. He was drenched in cold sweat in the distance. He had almost been killed? This was too terrifying. His broken body was rapidly reforming and flowing back with divine blood. He didn't dare imagine what would have happened if Wei Shilin hadn't taken action. Could it be that he would have been trapped here by the Sage Master's domain? Wei Shilin. The Sage Master spoke. He glanced at the distant brother of the past, the irreconcilable enemy of the present. Back then, Wei Shilin was the commander of a large army. He was wild and untamed, but in the end, his ambition and rebelliousness led to the bloody calamity later on. He turned around at the last moment and led the great army of the Outer Realms to charge straight in, catching the troops on his side unprepared. Many races were completely wiped out because of this, and their races were completely annihilated. Today, he had become the leader of a race known as the Shilin clan. Earth's top genius Wei Heng, known as the Ninth under the starry skies, had left with him. Brother Ichen. Wei Shilin smiled faintly and cupped his hands from afar. An invisible aura filled the air and the density of the energy was shocking. One had to admit that he was a genius. He hadn't revealed himself back then, but in the end, he had become a Heaven Illuminator. His path was even faster and fiercer than many of the so-called peerless geniuses of ancient times. The Sage Master was originally a calm person with no ripples in his emotions, but now, his pale face had turned even whiter. His two sworn brothers had become Heaven Illuminators in the past, but they had died so miserably. The ancient Earth was destroyed and blood flowed like rivers. Back then, the Sage Master indeed couldn't change anything, but he couldn't forgive those traitors. They stabbed their own people in the back at the crucial moment. Every time he thought about it, his heart would ache and he would grieve for the dead. The Sage Master raised his star-studded whip and pointed it at Wei Shilin. He felt stifled as he faced this old friend whom he had once drunk wine with. Brother Ichen, how have you been? We don't necessarily have to fight to the death. Wei Shilin smiled faintly. Boom. But the Sage Master had taken action. He knew that Wei Shilin wasn't reckless despite his arrogance. The other party was stalling for time and waiting for reinforcements to arrive. They couldn't possibly have so few people with them. They had paid a great price in order to surround the Sage Master. In the battlefield, the Spirit Ancestor moved rapidly in an attempt to tear space apart. That was because he had discovered that the Sage Master was targeting him and that he would be trapped here again. He didn't want to fall into a domain again and be suppressed. That feeling was too unbearable, and an accident had almost happened just now. Heh heh, someone laughed coldly all of a sudden. A giant metal man appeared and stood shoulder to shoulder with Wei Shilin in the sea of stars. The sun, moon, and stars were above his head, and his eyes were many times more majestic than most planets. He was a metal man, an old ancestor of the machine race known as the Eternal Vajra. He had also arrived and joined forces with Wei Shilin to resist the domain energy of the Sage Master I Ching. He stood there with an indifferent smile, but his eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. "What are you waiting for?" At this moment the great deity was roaring. He had reached a certain level of terror. Both of his arms had been eaten by Yao Yao's grandfather, and his body had been locked up by the mother metal. He couldn't escape even if he wanted to. He could only watch as he was being gnawed on. The flood dragon's claws were disappearing rapidly, drenched in blood. Any ordinary person would have collapsed by now. Yao Yao was beautiful and flawless like a fairy. Her white clothes danced in the wind as she stood on the bronze coffin and called out for her grandfather. She wanted to cry. She wasn't a weak person. She had experienced the tragedy of her family being destroyed after the ancient war. Her relatives had all died in battle, her fiancé had left, and she herself had fallen. Yet she hadn't cried even under such circumstances. When she told Chu Feng about her experiences back then, she was incomparably carefree with a smile on her face. But today she saw her grandfather in such a state, covered in corpse hair. Her heart trembled because she knew that her grandfather had suffered a lot back then. There was a reason why he hadn't participated in the war. Especially now, the old man was roaring like a wild beast with bloody tears hanging from the corners of his eyes. He was fighting with all his might to avenge them. That was why Yao Yao cried. She couldn't help but finally see her relatives. At this moment, the old man, who was about to eat the great deity alive, suddenly raised his head. His eyes were still scarlet like the moon of blood, but his gaze became somewhat gentle when he saw Yao Yao. This was his nature. This was a familial love that couldn't be severed. It seemed to be gradually awakening him. Yao. Yao. In the end, he even called out Yao Yao's name in an unclear voice. My. Yao Yao. The old man cried, and bloody tears rolled down his cheeks once again. There was a kind of willpower struggling in the depths of his heart, but he couldn't control himself completely. His subconscious recognized Yao Yao, but his divine eyes were also very sharp. He could see that she was an illusion and not real. That was why he was shedding bloody tears. My Yao Yao granddaughter, I want you back. In the end, the corpse-like old man unexpectedly became gentle for a moment as he spoke. Grandfather. Yao Yao was also crying. In the end, Wei Shilin's voice arrived with an indifferent smile. Uncle, long time no see. You've actually fallen to such a state. Wei Shilin spoke calmly, but his eyes were somewhat cold. He had just joined hands with the Eternal Vajra King to fight the Sage Master. Now, he had nothing to fear because the old monster had also arrived behind him. Doubtlessly, Wei Shilin's voice had agitated Yao Yao's grandfather. The old man looked up at the sky and roared like a peerless demon lord charging out of hell. He was boundless with anger and endless sorrow. He had lost control again. Yao Yao, my good granddaughter, I'm not good. I'll save you even if I have to die. At this moment, Yao Yao's grandfather's consciousness surged in his final moments. He growled like a wild beast, his voice unclear as he actually said such words. Kill, all of you must die. Yao Yao's grandfather roared. Then, his eyes turned from blood red to empty as he erupted with boundless might. Uncle, don't be so agitated. Wei Shilin smiled faintly and provoked him further. Wei Shilin, you deserve to die. The good-natured sage master swore like this at this moment. One could see just how angry he was. The great deity cried out miserably. He wanted to curse. In the end, he was the one who suffered during this confrontation. Yao Yao's grandfather was gnawing at him and carrying him forward to kill the enemy. All of a sudden, Yao Yao's grandfather disappeared inexplicably. Even the expressions of the heaven illuminators changed. This didn't conform to common sense. The law runes bloomed and then vanished in unpredictable trajectories. It was too strange. Chapter 734. It was earth-shattering and too sudden. Yao Yao's grandfather performed a special kind of teleportation. In the end, people couldn't sense the fluctuations of his power of order, and he appeared here. It was only a single punch, but it was filled with vigorous yang energy. It poured down like a mountain flood or an erupting volcano. Its radiance was too resplendent as it tore through the pitch-black cosmos and pierced through Wei Xilin's body. At this moment, the Xilin clan chief let out a furious roar. His entire face was distorted, and his body was bent like a shrimp as hot blood splashed out. It was too sudden that he had suffered a serious injury. Just now, he was still refined and indifferently advising Yao Yao's grandfather not to be agitated. He wanted to provoke him in a targeted manner. In the end, he suffered a heavy blow from the old man in the next instant, and it almost caused him to collapse. However, Wei Xilin was no ordinary person. Even though he was pierced by the fist seal and his body was convulsing uncontrollably, he still reacted immediately. He retreated like a beam of light amidst the cold darkness of the cosmos and evaded the fatal blow. His mouth was full of blood as he coughed nonstop. Fresh blood gushed up and gushed out from his mouth and nose. One could imagine how heavy Yao Yao's grandfather's punch was. At this moment, countless people across the universe held their breaths and watched nervously through the major platforms. All eyes were on him. All right, kill him. On Earth, even an evolver like Chu Feng couldn't help but jump up. He waved his fists with all his might and shouted loudly. He felt incomparably carefree. That was because he was really stifled in the beginning. He was afraid that something would happen to Yao Yao's grandfather, and he hated Wei Xilin's shamelessness even more. They had already reached the point where they couldn't live under the same sky, yet Wei Xilin still calmly called Yao Yao's grandfather uncle. He asked maliciously how the old man had fallen to such a state. Now, he was pierced through by Yao Yao's grandfather's fist. After his blood splattered everywhere, Chu Feng immediately let out a long breath of resentment. In the starry skies, many people's breathing became hurried and they cried out in alarm. The changes in this battle were too fast, and even the heaven illuminators could fall at any time. It affected everyone's hearts. Now all the major platforms were full, but in the end, the Black Blood Platform's foundation was strong enough. No one else could monitor it as clearly as they did. That was because they had the fiery eyes of truth at the Heaven Illuminator level. It was left behind by a supreme expert many years ago after his death, and they had obtained one. Therefore, even if the heavenly eyes of other platforms were well protected and protected with special devices, they would still be destroyed in the aftermath of such a battle, even if they were far enough away. Only the Black Blood Platform was the most stable at this time. It was worthy of being a super corporation in the universe, comparable to the ancient Wormhole Express Company. In the depths of Mount Eternal, the Black Yak was also shouting, "Attack! Kill Wei Xilin! This bastard is too hateful. We must kill him!" Outside of Mount Eternal, the old donkey, the Manchurian tiger, and the others couldn't calm down either. They were excited and rubbed their palms together, itching to charge into the starry sky. "Kill this traitor! Hee-haw, hee-haw, you deserve to die!" And everywhere in the universe it caused a huge uproar. "Ah!" Wei Xilin suddenly raised his head and roared. His whole body was erupting with runes of laws. He was like a ferocious lone wolf howling at the moon, but his body was still flying backward. He dodged and evaded Yao Yao's grandfather's pursuit. Although he was wild and unruly to his bones, he usually appeared calm and even somewhat scholarly. But now, His face was distorted and blood was flowing out of his 7 apertures. He looked somewhat sinister. However, he hadn't escaped the danger yet. Yao Yao's grandfather's body glowed, and his yang qi locked onto him like a waterfall. It connected the two like a shadow. Moreover, they were too close and had almost caught up in an instant. Kill. The eternal Vajra took action and charged forward. He was originally standing not far from Wei Shilin and was now helping him. Everyone knew that the machine race and the Shilin clan had a close relationship. Even their divine sons had come together when they arrived on Earth. Back then, there had been a large number of battleships in outer space. Destroy this monster. The spirit ancestor also shouted, calling upon the heaven illuminators who had rushed over to surround and kill Yao Yao's grandfather together. Kill. A roar rang out and the starry sky trembled. At this moment, the evolvers of various races on the countless vital planets in the various galaxies all stood up. Their hearts were surging, their blood was flowing, and their emotions were surging. All the powerful evolvers knew that a battle between gods had begun. Only a life and death battle between heaven illuminators could be called a battle between gods. This was a life and death battle between heaven illuminators. It was the most earth-shattering battle since ancient times. Boom! Yao Yao's grandfather was too fast. He was like an immortal bird spreading its wings and soaring as he carried the great deity, almost crippling him. The deity race's experts were drenched in blood and many of their bones were exposed. At this moment, Yao Yao's grandfather was mobilizing the power of the heavens. Every move he made shocked the world. When he took a step forward, the nearby planets shook and even time seemed to be flowing backward. It was too fast. He caught up to Wei Shilin and blasted him with another powerful and tyrannical punch. He wanted to use a disdainful attitude to kill this villain who had betrayed ancient Earth and turned around to kill his son. Ah! Wei Shilin roared. His chest felt stifled and sullen. This wasn't a reflection of his strength, because he had been locked onto and suppressed by the yang qi. The divine blood in his body couldn't circulate smoothly and he couldn't adjust to his peak state. He was being suppressed and beaten. He was forced to defend passively and had no choice but to face Yao Yao's grandfather again. His hands moved about, deducing the path of yin and yang. He wanted to use softness to overcome hardness and block this fatal blow. At the same time, his body rang with a sonorous sound as a layer of armor appeared. This was a special inner armor hidden within his flesh and appeared outside his body at the critical moment. This time, it wasn't too abrupt. He had enough time to use this kind of divine armor. However, as the immortal bird let out a long cry, Yao Yao's grandfather's fist suddenly became sparkling and translucent. It even became sharp as runes formed a beak like a phoenix's beak. Tsch. His fist blasted open Wei Shilin's defense and pierced through that light screen. The so-called subduing hardness with softness didn't play its intended role and was broken. Especially Wei Shilin's arms, which were drenched in blood. Some areas looked as though they had been pecked by immortal birds. His flesh had disappeared, revealing bloody bones. Then, a crisp sound rang out from his armor as it was penetrated by the fist. Yao Yao's grandfather's punch was too powerful. It emitted a bright light after penetrating his armor, and was about to shatter him. Ah! Wei Shilin cried out loudly. His body was trembling and his soul was throbbing. He felt as though he was about to disintegrate. After his treasured armor was broken, his blood flowed without end. But he was a ruthless person after all. A cold smile hung on his face as he controlled his body. Boundless energy gathered frantically and poured into the wound. Additionally, his bloody, bone-revealing hands grabbed Yao Yao's grandfather's arm and used his body to clamp this fist. He had thrown caution to the wind. "Uncle, long time no see. Let's communicate more," he roared and then rushed toward the people rushing over. "Kill him! When are we going to do it if not now?" Everyone was shocked. They felt that this Wei Shilin was a ruthless person. Did he not want his life anymore? Yao Yao's grandfather's fist was so terrifying. If he were to destroy it violently, he would definitely disintegrate and his spirit might even be completely destroyed. Could it be that he had some secret technique? In the distance, the sage master I Chun rushed over at top speed. Moreover, he used one star after another to develop the power of a domain. He wanted to stop everyone and obstruct the other experts. That was because he knew that although Wei Shilin was arrogant and untamed, he had always been cautious. He wouldn't take the risk of putting himself in danger and might have a backup plan. Kill! The sage master brandished the star-studded whip and swept it forward. The light beam shocked the sky and the group of stars swayed. Some of the stars formed a large bow which condensed the energy of the stars in the sky and shot out a terrifying arrow. Monster, go to hell! At this time, the great deity's long and narrow golden eyes also emitted a cold light. He was incomparably sinister. Both his arms had been eaten and he was being held by Yao Yao's grandfather's other hand. However, he was glowing and countless runes locked onto Yao Yao's grandfather. He wanted to imprison him along with Wei Shilin. Boom! The sword wheel formed from 9 brightly colored energy swords above Yao Yao's grandfather's head pressed down to kill them. But the two of them were fighting with their lives on the line. Boundless light rushed out from the top of their heads like pillars supporting the sky and blocked the sword wheel. Resplendent law runes flickered as they clenched their teeth and persevered. They weren't willing to let go of Yao Yao's grandfather. They wanted to wait until the others arrived and kill him. Monster, your heirs are all dead. Why are you still acting so fierce? Why don't you go too? The eternal Vajra roared. He was the first to approach, but the sage master's domain obstructed his approach. It wasn't smooth at all. At this moment, everyone was incomparably nervous. The battle had reached its climax and life and death could be decided at any moment. Now, it just so happened to be the crucial moment. Countless evolvers in the cosmos almost stopped breathing. They felt incomparably nervous and their bodies couldn't help but tense up. They didn't even dare blink for fear of missing something. Boom! At this moment, the battle was intense. Yao Yao's grandfather swung the great deity and used him as a weapon to attack Wei Shilin. At the same time, his right fist suddenly shook Wei Shilin's body. That terrifying power was too crazy. One could see blood splattering in all directions and Wei Shilin's body was cracking. He had suffered extremely serious injuries. If this went on, he would explode. Monster, go reunite with your son and granddaughter. Your family must reunite in the end. The eternal Vajra arrived to kill him. He was using a spiritual storm. His voice was grand and engulfed the entire void. That was his spiritual power spreading out to attack Yao Yao's grandfather. At the same time, an indescribable old monster appeared without a sound. He was not far away and his whole body was covered in a black robe. His aura was cold and gloomy as he charged forward. The sage master I Chen's expression changed. He brandished the star-studded whip with all his might in order to cut off this part of the starry sky and cut off their path forward. Domain runes interweaved and the stars in the sky provided energy. Boom! There was a huge explosion in front of him. The eternal Vajra staggered and his body shook violently. That old monster was even more cautious and didn't want to be entangled by the domain. He disappeared in a split second and changed his position. The spirit ancestor's luck wasn't good. The sage master had personally intercepted him. The spirit ancestor was already injured, and now he was struck in the shoulder by a large bow formed from the resonance of the stars. Blood splattered everywhere as he staggered. In the end, the eternal Vajra was the first to attack. He had a close relationship with Wei Shilin and the two races were the closest allies. He rushed to the back of Yao Yao's grandfather and raised his hand to attack the back of the old man's head. He wanted to kill him in one strike. The situation was incomparably critical. Two heaven illuminators were entangling Yao Yao's grandfather. It seemed as though he couldn't separate his mind and was locked in place. At this moment, countless people in the starry sky were breathing rapidly. Their chests were heaving up and down violently as they stared in shock. Go on your way and reunite with your family. The eternal Vajra unleashed a spiritual storm once again and roared. This kind of energy was attacking Yao Yao's grandfather's soul. A glimmer of hope flickered in the great deity's eyes. If he could kill Yao Yao's grandfather with this attack, he would be completely free. As such, he exerted even more effort to unleash the law runes in order to entangle his opponent. Meanwhile, Wei Shilin's body was about to explode. Much of his flesh was detached and his white bones were exposed, but he was still going all out to clamp down on Yao Yao's grandfather's arm. He was using all his means to confine it. "Uncle, you should go on your way. It's too lonely to live alone in this world." There was blood at the corner of his mouth. That kind of smile made people feel a little scared. The time in that split second was too strange. It seemed like an eternity and actually seemed a little long. Everyone was watching nervously. Everything would come to an end in a split second. At this moment, all the evolvers on Earth were incomparably afraid. Chu Feng, Yellow Cattle, and the others' hearts were in their throat. They were restless and afraid that the old man would die a violent death and be hunted down by these people. Boom! At the critical moment, time seemed to flow backward and distort everything. Although Yao Yao's grandfather was lost, his powerful battle instincts were still there. It was extremely terrifying. Although his body couldn't move at the last moment, the sword wheel above his head shifted in that instant. This was a peerless divine technique from the Yang realm. 9 divine swords of different colors formed a sword wheel that suppressed everything. In that split second, he relaxed his defense and suppression toward the great deity and Wei Shilin. The sword wheel resisted the invasion of the spiritual storm behind him and the attack of the eternal Vajra's supreme fist seal. He used the sword wheel to resist and block the enemy behind him. Countless rays of light rained down, but they couldn't harm his body. Clang! At the same time, Yao Yao's grandfather's body leaned forward and his right leg kicked backward like the tail of a shoe. With a boom, he kicked the eternal Vajra, who was temporarily confined by the sword wheel in the chest, and then his chin. In a split second, the eternal Vajra's metal body caved in. His chest was deformed and his chin was distorted beyond recognition. His mouth was blocked and disappeared, turning into a large lump of iron. The most important thing was that this attack contained a soul attack. It also attacked his soul and caused him to tremble violently. In the end, he was sent flying by the kick. At this moment, Wei Shilin was also screaming. He simply couldn't hold on any longer. Yao Yao's grandfather's fist seal burst forth with might within his body and was about to destroy him. Undead Silkworm Transformation Technique. Wei Shilin let out a low roar and went all out. His body glowed as he wanted to break free from this deadlock. He didn't want to be killed. Roar! Yao Yao's grandfather responded with a loud roar that shook the universe and starry skies. His right fist seal erupted with dazzling light. Chapter 735. Yao Yao's grandfather was tall and covered in long black hair. He was majestic and intimidating as he charged over with the great deity in tow. He shattered Wei Shilin with a single punch, causing him to disintegrate and splatter blood across the cosmos. This punch was too tyrannical. That was an expert at the Heaven Illuminator realm and a famous person in the universe. He was extremely famous since ancient times, yet he was blasted apart just like that. Blood and broken bones scattered in all directions, causing some planets to explode. Numerous balls of light blossomed in the dark cosmos. It was a shocking sight. Wei Shilin had been killed just like that. No one could believe it. This was too terrifying. He was the Shilin clan's patriarch, the most powerful army commander on the 11th-ranked ancient planet. Although his character was problematic, and he had a rebellious bone in the back of his head, no one would deny his strength. This was a heaven illuminator who had been active since ancient times. At this moment, the entire starry sky was momentarily silent. All the evolvers were stunned. At this moment, people felt that Yao Yao's grandfather was unfathomable. His body was like a demon's as he stood tall and unreachable in the cosmos. Especially since he had killed Wei Shilin while carrying the great deity in tow. This made him seem even more powerful and domineering. At this moment, the great deity, an overlord whose name had shaken the cosmos for a long time, had undoubtedly become a powerful background wall. A character like him could actually be considered a peerless expert. He was extremely powerful, but he was unfortunately caught in someone else's hands and treated as prey and spoils of war. The more powerful he was, the more obvious he was. This battle of Yao Yao's grandfather shocked the entire cosmos. Additionally, the eternal Vajra's chest had caved in with a terrifying footprint behind him. His chin no longer existed as it had fused with his mouth and nose, turning into a lump of iron. This enormous machine race expert, who called himself the Eternal Vajra, had also become a background wall. He stood up after smashing through a large planet and glared angrily in this direction. His ferocity and anger couldn't change anything. They had been completely defeated in the intense exchange just now. He's dead. Did Wei Shilin disappear from the world just like that? Such a powerful race leader was actually killed so easily. This isn't right, is it? A peerless expert. This old man from ancient Earth is too terrifying. He's like a peerless demon lord. Where did he come from? The various lands erupted with commotion. Everyone's hearts were pounding, their emotions surging up and down. They were all quite shocked. Something's not right. On Earth, Chu Feng saw an anomaly. At the same time, many evolvers in the cosmos sensed that there was light jumping in that part of the starry sky and then condensing. In truth, the Sage Master had long since been alerted and had personally killed his way over. He charged toward a certain direction and used the domain's energy to perform a great spatial shift. Wei Shilin, die! The sacred expert shouted loudly, his head of long silver hair flying about, his clothes also fluttering about. He turned into a streak of light, appearing before them. He noticed that something was wrong. Wei Shilin's soul was still alive. At the same time, everyone became alert. They recalled how Wei Shilin had roared the undead silkworm transformation art before his body exploded. Now, it seemed he had succeeded. The sacred expert understood him very well. If this person didn't have certainty, he wouldn't fight with his life on the line like this. It was clear that he had a trump card, precisely this type of undying technique. The undead silkworm was a kind of mystical creature in the universe. It was an abnormally powerful race. Although there weren't many of them, their divine abilities were shocking. They could be reborn as long as they had the slightest chance of survival. Wei Shilin had grasped their race's peerless divine art. It was an extremely powerful secret art and definitely a peerless divine technique. Earlier on, he dared to hold on to Yao Yao's grandfather with all his might. It looked like he wanted to perish indiscriminately because he was confident that he could escape death. His methods were indeed ruthless. If the other heaven illuminators had arrived at the right time and surrounded Yao Yao's grandfather, it would have been terrifying. However, his plan was good and he was ruthless enough to himself. However, Yao Yao's grandfather's strength had exceeded his expectations. He had no temper at the last moment and his confidence was shaken. His scalp went numb and he felt terrified. At that time, Yao Yao's grandfather had broken free from his and the great deity's joint imprisonment. He had kicked the eternal Vajra and almost killed him. In the end, he had destroyed Wei Shilin's physical body and disintegrated his soul into fragments. If it were anyone else, even a heaven illuminator would most likely be slaughtered. Even if they hadn't died completely, they would be annihilated by that majestic fist seal. That was because the so-called rebirth from a single drop of blood required one's soul. That fist just now had directly shattered Wei Shilin's spirit. Boom! Wisps of light rushed out from the fragments of Wei Shilin's flesh in the void. They turned into thousands of small silkworms and moved rapidly to devour the free energy in the cosmos. Countless small silkworms moved like lightning. They rushed up rapidly and then gathered together. This was the heaven-defying undead silkworm technique, a peerless divine technique. They gathered in front of everyone and rapidly took shape. With a bang, all the small silkworms merged into one and formed a large silkworm. Then, it was enveloped by a screen of light and a cocoon appeared around its body. Boom! At the same time, the Sage Master Ichen arrived and smashed down with the star-studded whip. Even a peaceful person like him hated Wei Shilin so much. One could see how deep the obsession in his heart was. His heart had been deeply wounded in the ancient battle. With a bang, the cocoon around the undead silkworm exploded. At the same time, Wei Shilin reappeared and let out a muffled groan. He had suffered yet another heavy injury and his body was covered in cracks. That was because he had been beaten up by Yao Yao's grandfather. Even with the undead deity art, his vitality and origin were greatly damaged. At this time, he was attacked once again, adding insult to injury and almost exploding again. In truth, Yao Yao's grandfather wouldn't have given Wei Shilin the chance to use this divine technique if he hadn't lost his mind. He would have taken advantage of the time when Wei Shilin hadn't reassembled and dealt a blow that would have killed him completely. Boom! The Sage Master's star-studded whip descended once more. Wei Shilin's arms were broken and a mist of blood filled the air. However, the star-studded whip didn't stop there. It continued to descend and, with a bang, sent Wei Shilin flying and almost cut his shoulder into two. Wei Shilin's body was almost separated and only connected by a single point. "What are you waiting for?" Wei Shilin roared furiously. He had miscalculated a step and now, every step was wrong. He was too passive and had almost lost his life. "Kill!" The eternal Vajra pounced over and so did the spirit ancestor. At the same time, the black-robed old monster finally took action for the first time. Especially that old monster. He suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was holding a large black sword. Without a sound or aura, he slashed at Yao Yao's grandfather's head. It was a fatal attack, taking advantage of his muddled mind. Unfortunately, he didn't succeed in taking advantage of the opponent's confusion. Yao Yao's grandfather's instincts were too terrifying. He moved his body with a swoosh and the 9 energy swords above his head formed a sword wheel. It pressed forward and slashed the large black sword into powder with a bang. Next, the sword wheel crushed forward. This was an unrivaled momentum. Everyone had seen how this sword wheel had suppressed the great deity, Wei Shilin, and the eternal Vajra. However, this black-robed old man was extremely terrifying. He vanished into thin air, and no one could see how he had left. On Earth, Chu Feng drew in a breath of cold air. He had realized that this was a ruthless character. He had such speed even when facing a peerless expert like Yao Yao's grandfather. He might be able to threaten Yao Yao's grandfather by disappearing in an instant. Some old-school characters across the universe were horrified. They had realized who this was. The legends are true. There's an old fellow in the Sky Piercer who has long since become a heaven illuminator. Many powerful evolvers trembled. That was because this black-robed man had displayed the style of a dark hunter. It was an extremely powerful assassination technique. It was impossible to guard against such a person, especially since he had evolved to this stage and had long since become a heaven illuminator. It was too easy for him to kill someone if he wanted to. Only Yao Yao's grandfather, with his powerful instincts, could see through everything immediately. That was why he hadn't been assassinated. Boom! As expected, A terrifying fist light appeared once again in the next moment. That black-robed old man suddenly attacked Yao Yao's grandfather's head from another direction. Even heaven illuminators drew in a breath of cold air when they saw this situation. As expected, this was the most powerful Dark Hunter. This was an ancestor-level character in the field of assassination. What shocked everyone was that in the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, this veteran assassin carried out more than 10 assassinations. The angles were too tricky and impossible to guard against. Even the eternal Vajra, the spirit ancestor, and the great deity's expressions changed. This old monster made them incomparably fearful. Boom! When the 19th assassination came, Yao Yao's grandfather suddenly waved his fist and collided with a fist that appeared out of nowhere in the void. Boom! The sky collapsed and the earth cracked. Ghosts wept and gods howled as this part of the starry sky exploded. This kind of scene shocked all the powerhouses. The Sky-Piercer's old ancestor was too powerful. He could actually withstand an attack from Yao Yao's grandfather's fist imbued with unyielding yang qi. One had to know that the others couldn't bear it earlier, especially the Netherworld race and the deity race. Each of them had lost a peerless expert. However, the old assassin's fist trembled slightly and disappeared rapidly. Buzz. In reality, Yao Yao's grandfather was even more terrifying. This time, he relied on his instincts to grasp the enemy's trajectory. The sword wheel swept out and suppressed a certain part of the void. Blood splattered everywhere as the Sky-Piercer's old ancestor was injured. One of his arms was almost cut off by the sword wheel. He fled at top speed and disappeared in an instant. This made all the evolvers in the starry sky tremble and speechless. The Dark Hunter was injured and almost killed. Roar. At the same time, Yao Yao's grandfather carried the great deity's body as a weapon and charged toward Wei Shilin once more. That was because the Sage Master was in trouble and was being attacked by 3 experts. Otherwise, he might have seized the opportunity to kill off the injured Wei Shilin. Yao Yao's grandfather arrived in a single step. His subconscious was fluctuating violently as though he had an instinctive reaction against Wei Shilin. As long as Wei Shilin's soul was still there, he could attract his attention and attack once more. Wei Shilin's scalp went numb. He knew he was in deep trouble. Boom! Wei Shilin's cracked body disintegrated during the second collision. Half of his body fell off and flew out. His heart sank as he felt he might be killed. Clang! Yao Yao's grandfather struck out with his fist, smashing the eternal Vajra's metallic body until it deformed. The spirit ancestor's heart trembled when facing such a fierce person. He couldn't help but retreat. What are you retreating for? If we can't even kill him in his current state, what will we do in the future? Wei Shilin roared. In the end, he shouted, Spirit Ancestor, use your race's taboo weapon, the Divine Blood Banner. I know it's still there. The Divine Blood Banner was once a taboo item that shook the entire universe. In the end, even the 10 Greats were worried about it. They formed a group to suppress the spirit race and dismantle this supreme treasure. The spirit ancestor was shocked but didn't reply. The great deity's eyes lit up. He was about to be killed and had become a human-shaped weapon in someone else's hands. He was incomparably sullen as he shouted, Use the Divine Blood Banner. This time, the 10 Greats won't blame your race. I'll take care of it. Against such a fierce person, now is the time to kill him. Fellow Taoists, have you guys arrived? Attack. We can't let this monster go or there'll be big trouble in the future. The eternal Vajra shouted as he gazed into the depths of the starry skies. Buzz! As expected, someone had arrived. It was a humanoid entity shrouded in primal chaos, concealing its true body. Additionally, the old assassin from Sky-Piercer had returned. He had set up an altar and was summoning something there. Divine Blood Banner. But the most shocking thing was the spirit ancestor. He was chanting a certain incantation and summoning that taboo weapon. Buzz! The universe's starry skies split open as a terrifying banner appeared. The banner's surface was blood-red and full of cracks as though it had been pieced together. At this moment, the banner's surface was swaying as though it was about to cover the entire starry sky. Haha, this is a true ultimate weapon, a peerless treasure. No matter how capable you are, you'll still have to bear a grudge. The spirit ancestor's confidence increased 100-fold. Back then, this weapon had swept through everything before it. At the same time, the Skypiercer's old ancestor was also making his move. He stood on the altar and summoned something. In the end, a blood-colored divine sword flew out from the depths of the cosmos. It carried boundless blood energy and boundless killing intent. This was the Skypiercer's supreme weapon. Normally, it was buried in a pool of blood and nourished. This was a killing Tao treasure. As soon as it appeared, a rain of blood filled the area. This was an ultimate weapon nurtured by all of the Skypiercer's killing intent. At the same time, there were other people approaching from the depths of the cosmos. They were terrifying heaven illuminators. The most terrifying moment had arrived. When they summoned their intimidating weapons, Yao Yao's grandfather only targeted Wei Shilin and attacked him fiercely. Meanwhile, the Sage Master cooperated wholeheartedly and used a domain to lock down the starry skies. Wei Shilin screamed miserably as he was smashed into pieces by Yao Yao's grandfather's fist that illuminated the starry skies. Swoosh! Countless little silkworms were moving. They wanted to rush out and escape, but unfortunately, they were intercepted. At this moment, the sword wheel above Yao Yao's grandfather's head glowed and crushed everything in its path. Countless little silkworms screamed as though all the ghosts in hell were wailing. Puffed. The sword wheel swept through all the little silkworms and killed them all. Wei Shilin's final screams came to a sudden stop as he vanished. He had been killed until he exploded and vanished from the face of the earth. But at this moment, Yao Yao's grandfather and the Sage Master had encountered the greatest trouble. Their situation was worrying and the most difficult moment had arrived. That was because some figures were approaching from the depths of the cosmos, all of them carrying powerful weapons. Here, the divine blood banner fluttered and covered the cosmos. The Skypiercer's glowing red and blazing killing Tao treasure was also trembling. It shot out divine radiance and tore the cosmos apart. These weapons were too terrifying, and more people came. On Mount Eternal, the Black Yak, Yellow Cattle, and Ouyang Feng were anxious as they conversed with the demonic ancestral cauldron. What do you think of those weapons? Extremely shocking. They can kill the souls of heaven illuminators. They're much stronger than the great deity's shattered weapon, the demonic ancestral cauldron said in a mechanical voice. What about you, the demonic ancestral cauldron's remnant? How powerful are you? Asked the Black Yak. I'm the demonic ancestral cauldron's weapon. Naturally, my power is peerless, replied the demonic ancestral cauldron. The Black Yak said fiercely, That's great. Go, enter the starry skies and let that old man use you to kill everyone. He lacks a suitable weapon. Today, he'll pierce through the heavens even if he has to fight until the cosmos is torn apart. At the same time, in a certain starry domain, Uncle Ming summoned a group of elders. Upon careful observation, they were all people who had been imprisoned in the universe's dark prison. They had just escaped from the dark prison the Shilin clan was in charge of guarding. They were all released by Chu Feng and Uncle Ming that day. Today, Uncle Ming had contacted many people and gathered them together. Old brothers, let's go and do something big too. The heaven illuminators have all left, and the rear is empty. Let's go and raid their lair. This time, no one will stop us, and no one will be able to kill us. Let's go to their main camp and raid their houses. Chapter 736. Even if there were exceptional characters confronting each other since ancient times, it wouldn't be like this. Heaven illuminators came into being one after another, and the scale of the divine war was escalating. The divine war truly made one's heart palpitate. It was a battle that terrified every race. It would easily affect the major galaxies and inadvertently destroy some vital planet. Now, the battle was continuing and becoming more and more intense. A terrifying figure stood in the depths of the dark universe. It was boundlessly huge, and only its eyes could be seen clearly. It was vigorous and terrifying, like a dazzling blade that was 50,000 kilometers long. It stared coldly at Yao Yao's grandfather and the Sage Master. There was also a figure approaching without a sound. He was shrouded in primal chaos and submerged many of the nearby planet. Nothing could be seen and everything was misty. There was also a blurry figure surrounded by dried bones. He wore an armor made of ancient skeletons and rode a bone dragon with a threatening aura as he approached. The enemy rose in revolt. The spirit ancestor was the first to attack because he had obtained the forbidden weapon that once shook the starry seas, the spiritualized blood banner. It was extremely terrifying. With a shake of the banner, the vast sky cracked and the starry skies were almost destroyed. It was too terrifying. The banner's surface was scarlet and slightly old. It was full of cracks like densely packed porcelain. The patterns on it were like spider webs, but it was terrifying as it covered the starry skies. Bang, bang, bang. In just a split second, some planets near Yao Yao's grandfather exploded. Nothing could stop the banner as it swept over. It was as easy as breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Woo-woo. At the same time, howls rang out in the universe's starry skies. It sounded like the weeping of a demonic god or the unwilling roar of a malicious spirit from hell. They were all coming from the spiritualized blood banner. Although Yao Yao's grandfather was lost, he could sense the danger. Like an illusory flower, he disappeared from his original spot and evaded. The Sage Master moved with him and also avoided the spirit race's treasure. Boom! When the banner swept past, the area exploded. The starry skies were annihilated, and a huge black hole appeared. The spiritualized blood banner was invincible. Monster, there are times when you guys are afraid? Come on, go crazy again. Today, I'll use this banner to collect your souls and refine your spiritual cores. Let's see where you can run to. A pair of demonic wings sprouted from the spirit ancestor's ribs as he charged over with extreme speed. He held the divine blood banner in his hand and charged toward Yao Yao's grandfather and the Sage Master. Earlier on, he was suppressed by the Sage Master and had a bellyful of anger. Now that he had the opportunity, he naturally went all out. Yao Yao's grandfather quickly dodged while the Sage Master arranged the stars and formed a domain to resist. However, there were too many enemies at the moment. Not far away, another person took action. With a boom, a large hand covered in green scales slammed down and directly interfered with the Sage Master's domain. Chi. There were even people who spat out sword radiance from their mouth. It was as if a stellar stream was flying over, illuminating the dusky cosmos. It was too glaring, the sword energy breaking down many celestial bodies. Haha, thank you, fellow Taoists. Let's kill them together. The spirit ancestor laughed heartily. The divine blood banner was truly worthy of being called a forbidden weapon. It was becoming more and more terrifying. After the banner was unfurled, it covered the entire starry sky. It was blood-red and had traces of cracks. Its might was boundless. Chi chi chi. At this moment, both Yao Yao's grandfather and the Sage Master felt their blood essence rushing out and submerging into the banner. With a buzzing sound, Yao Yao's grandfather let out a roar and swung the great deity forward. At this moment, the great deity was in a terrible mood and was somewhat fearful. He had become a weapon just like that and could be crippled at any time. When had the deity race ever fallen to such a state? They were simply the most sullen overlords. Ah! The great deity screamed. His blood flew out rapidly, and some parts of his body shriveled up. The divine blood banner's reputation shook the ancient times and indeed wasn't just an undeserved reputation. It made people tremble in fear because even someone at his level was being robbed of his life energy. At the same time, this part of the starry sky exploded once more. The spirit ancestor simply had an invincible momentum with this banner in his hand. It was merely a weapon, yet he was able to reach this step. One could well imagine how precious this weapon was. Spirit ancestor, are you trying to kill me? The great deity let out a deep roar. Don't worry, great deity. I know what I'm doing. You're only slightly injured now. My race's treasure won't really take your life. The spirit ancestor secretly transmitted his voice. At this moment, Yao Yao's grandfather was forced into a disadvantageous position. There was an existence covered in bone armor in the area behind him. He was riding a bone dragon and was ready to launch an attack at any time. This was an old monster and the aura he emitted was abnormally powerful. Kill. When the divine blood banner unfolded once more, the starry sky was split into pieces. With this weapon, one could simply sweep through the universe and carve out a territory that no one could stop. Boom. At the final juncture, not only did Yao Yao's grandfather wave the great deity to block in front of him, but he was all skin and bones and had lost most of his blood energy. He also activated his trump card. The sword wheel came out again. With a boom, 9 brightly colored energy swords revolve. The sword wheel was incomparably blazing as it collided with the divine blood banner. Blood energy and colorful light burst forth together and illuminated the vast starry sky of the universe. Countless people were horrified. Even the heaven illuminators were falling back. This kind of collision was too shocking. The space in that area was annihilated inch by inch. Many planets turned into fine powder and became cosmic dust. The sword wheel could actually block this ancient and modern forbidden weapon. The spirit ancestor gasped for breath and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He was overwhelmed with shock because no one knew better than him how terrifying this divine blood banner was. It resonated with the laws of heaven and earth and interweaved with the order of the universe. When it attacked, the caster's attack power would increase by more than several times. In addition, it could also devour the enemy's blood energy and energy. Its killing power was boundless. But now, Yao Yao's grandfather didn't use a weapon and only relied on a kind of divine technique to block the divine blood banner. It shook him until he coughed up blood. At the same time, his eyes flashed and he discovered that the cracks on the banner's surface had somewhat expanded. The most terrifying thing was that there was even a small corner of it broken off in one place. This made him feel heartache and horrified. "You monster!" he roared furiously. But what made him slightly relieved was that the sword wheel above Yao Yao's grandfather's head had dissipated. This attack consumed an enormous amount of energy. Moreover, a wisp of blood flowed from the corner of the old man's mouth. It made a sizzling sound like boiling water appearing in a world of ice and snow. The yang qi in his blood was too heavy. "Let's see how many of my attacks you can block," shouted the spirit ancestor. "Are you trying to kill me?" The great deity was anxious. If these two were to fight to the death, he would definitely die first. Right now, he had a feeling that it was better to die than to live. His body was tattered and abnormally withered. He had lost too much blood essence. "Dao friends, let's attack together. Stop watching from the sidelines," shouted the spirit ancestor. In reality, there was no need for him to shout. Someone had already made their move. The void was cut open soundlessly. A blood-red divine sword appeared and went straight for the back of Yao Yao's grandfather's head. Only when it neared did this supreme, killing treasure blossom with blazing red light. The surrounding blood energy was like boiling magma, shattering the space. It was too sinister and ruthless. This kind of method naturally came from the Skypiercer's old ancestor. He was an old monster who had lived for a long time. He was a dark hunter who would use any means necessary to kill his enemies. Clang! At the crucial moment, the sword wheel appeared again and shook off this supreme killing treasure that illuminated the entire universe with its red light. For a moment, sword chi surged unhindered as the red killing sword hacked over continuously. It was incomparably powerful as it confronted the sword wheel. This made everyone dumbstruck. Everyone knew how terrifying the sword wheel was, but now the Sky-Piercer's supreme treasure actually had this kind of power. It was almost no weaker than the divine blood banner and could confront the sword wheel. This was a treasure that all heaven illuminators yearned for even in their dreams. "Kill!" shouted the Sage Master I Ching. He spread out the stars and used his domain in order to seize that red divine sword. Hee everyone, let's hunt together. It's better to have fun together than to have fun alone." The old monster from the Sky-Piercer invited everyone to attack together. "All right." Someone immediately responded. Not everyone had such a peerless weapon, but all heaven illuminators were terrifying. Even a bare-handed attack was fatal. The person riding the bone dragon made his move. He came from the netherworld race, and had come from their ancestral land to avenge his clansmen. Earlier on, Yao Yao's grandfather had killed a big shot from the netherworld race. "Haha, it's time to kill this fiend. Let's destroy them together and erase the hidden dangers left behind by the ancient times." The eternal Vajra laughed loudly as he approached quickly. At the same time, a large green hand covered in scales stretched out rapidly and smashed the starry skies with shocking divine might. In a split second, everyone rose in revolt. Clang! At the crucial moment, the Sage Master let Yao Yao hide in the bronze coffin. This coffin also became a weapon to fight against the enemies. Yao Yao's grandfather saw his granddaughter in such a dangerous situation and was forced to hide in the coffin. He seemed to be stimulated and let out a beastly roar. He was already lost, and now the aura he emitted was even more terrifying. Roar! When he roared, the starry skies shook. He unleashed his fist seals, activated the sword wheel, and released the Mother Gold divine chain in his body to attack the enemies. However, no matter how powerful he was, he had to bear a grudge against such a siege. This was because these were terrifying heaven illuminators. Most importantly, they had the divine blood banner and the supreme killing treasure nurtured in the Sky-Piercer's blood pool. They were too great a threat to him and could easily injure his soul. This part of the starry skies was boiling. Order runes interweaved like the feathers of a phoenix, dazzling and dazzling. This part of the world had collapsed. The Sage Master and Yao Yao's grandfather were in danger. They were covered in blood and heavily injured. "Uncle, let's go," said the Sage Master I Ching. He took Yao Yao's grandfather with him and set up a domain. He was about to step onto a star passage. "I Ching, you still want to escape? We've cut off the entire universe's path. None of you can leave. All of you will die. Isn't this old fellow very powerful? He'll be beheaded today just like his heaven-bestowed son from back then," roared the spirit ancestor. The heaven illuminators in the surroundings didn't utter a word. They attacked silently and launched their strongest attacks. The Sage Master was sent flying and coughed up large mouthfuls of blood. His domain had been broken by brute force, and he had lost contact with the domains he had set up in the distance. "In the end, we still have to escape. We'll use this coffin to cross into the broken universe in the primal chaos. Uncle, come with me," said the Sage Master as he guided Yao Yao's grandfather. I Ching was very regretful. He knew that if the old man was clear-headed, his combat strength would definitely explode. He would most likely be able to kill some of his opponents and charge out directly. At this moment, on Mount Eternal, the Black Yak said anxiously, "Quickly!" He was urging the demonic ancestral cauldron because the situation was too critical. However, this object of inheritance was emitting a mechanical voice from beginning to end. It reasoned with him and said that it couldn't leave Mount Eternal. "Get lost. If you don't leave, we'll fight it out with you. We'll abandon this place and not be the demonic ancestral cauldron's so-called disciples. We'll split up, roared Ouyang Fong. Not to mention the black yak and Ouyang Fong, even the good-tempered yellow cattle was furious. He forcefully slapped the large cauldron and glared at it. In the end, the demonic ancestral cauldron agreed and said, "Fine." After thousands of years, many people have long forgotten the might of the demonic ancestral cauldron. They don't know how strong he is, nor what level of weapon the demonic ancestral cauldron is. Today we'll reappear in the world and go on a killing spree. With a hum, it borrowed the little energy it had left to fly out of Mount Eternal and into the universe. It disappeared in a flash. In the blink of an eye, it rushed into the arena and its mechanical voice rang in the Sage Master's ears. It was also transmitted to Yao Yao's grandfather's heart. In the end, the Sage Master hadn't even made a move. It was actually Yao Yao's grandfather who instinctively snatched the cauldron. Then, he lifted the cauldron and frantically poured energy into it. He aimed the mouth of the cauldron at the enemy and began to attack. A glaring demonic light flew out from the mouth of the cauldron and pierced through the eternal Vajra. He looked down in disbelief at the large hole in his body and then retreated with a blood-curdling scream. Clang! The next moment, another demonic light flew out from the mouth of the cauldron and bombarded the divine blood banner. The banner's surface actually emitted a crackling sound. The original cracks were all expanding. After that, the banner's surface was like porcelain that had suffered a heavy blow as it fell into pieces. Ah no! The spirit ancestor cried out miserably. This was their race's supreme treasure. His heart ached unbearably. However, when another demonic light flew out from the mouth of the large cauldron, even he was hit. The lower half of the spirit ancestor's body immediately exploded and turned into a bloody mist. In addition, after Yao Yao's grandfather held this large cauldron in his hand, his attack power also rose sharply. The two fused and resonated, amplifying the attack's energy. At this moment, the sword wheel above Yao Yao's grandfather's head reappeared. It was even more resplendent and incomparable than before. Bang! Chapter 737. The reversal of the situation was too fast for people to accept. Of course, it was even harder to accept the fact that the loose alliance in the outer realms had been beaten senseless. The spirit ancestor was the most unwilling as he was almost crippled. The old monster from the Sky Piercer was horrified. The sword wheel had left hundreds of wounds on his body. His bones were exposed and blood was gushing out. He was almost beheaded. If he wasn't a supreme assassin who was good at hiding and attacking the strong with the weak, he would have died with a grievance this time. There's nothing to be afraid of. Everyone, let's attack together and destroy him. The spirit ancestor stood in the distance and shouted while dragging the divine blood banner. Right now, even his heart was dripping blood. A large piece of the forbidden artifact banner in his hands was missing, scattering through the cosmos. The scarlet fragments were all refined from exceptionally rare materials. Yao Yao's grandfather carried the large cauldron and activated this treasure left behind from countless years ago to give him another attack. The spirit ancestor's scalp went numb. Could he still use the divine blood banner to block it? He was really afraid it would be destroyed. He moved his body sideways and did his best to avoid the light. However, he was horrified to find that the demonic light deviated and approached his body. It was already in front of him. "Divine banner, help me!" he shouted. He held the divine blood banner with both hands and waved it violently toward the demonic light behind him. Boom! This time, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. A demonic wind swept through the starry skies. All kinds of demon race runes bloomed and submerged the divine blood banner. Crack, the spirit race's ultimate weapon, suffered a calamity. The banner exploded completely and no longer existed. The scarlet pieces were all fragments of the treasure. They flew in all directions and rushed into the depths of the cosmos. The spirit ancestor shouted, "No!" His eyes were spitting fire. Back then, the spirit race had spent a lot of effort to collect these fragments. Now they were destroyed again. Back then, the 10 greats each had an old monster who forcefully tore down the divine blood banner. Now this treasure encountered a calamity again. Chi! The sage master waved the star-studded whip. The domain appeared once again and trapped the spirit ancestor, preventing him from escaping. "Everyone, quickly come and kill this fiend!" the spirit ancestor roared. However, the old monster from the Nether tribe who was riding on the bone dragon turned around and left after hearing those words. With a single movement, he disappeared. Boom! At this moment, Yao Yao's grandfather activated the large cauldron. The light beam that flew out from the mouth of the cauldron transformed into lightning and struck the spirit ancestor's body. He couldn't evade it. The spirit ancestor let out a blood-curdling screech. With a pop, he disintegrated and exploded in an instant. When a heaven illuminator perished, blood was everywhere in this space. A streak of light flew out. It was very dim, and it wanted to silently pierce through the void and escape from this battlefield. That was the spirit ancestor's spiritual origin core. Unfortunately, even though Yao Yao's grandfather wasn't clear-headed, his battle consciousness was too strong. He could sense it, and he would strike a killing blow against anyone who made an enemy of him. The sword wheel above his head flew out and crushed that spirit origin core into fine powder. The spirit ancestor died tragically. He was reduced to ashes in the rain of blood. However, the metal pole of the divine blood banner pierced through the void with a whoosh and disappeared along with some of the banner's fragments. This thing was indeed intelligent. It even knew how to escape. It actually took the opportunity to escape from the battlefield. The main thing was that Yao Yao's grandfather's attention wasn't on her anymore. The spirit ancestor's death on the battlefield affected everyone greatly. The divine blood banner didn't block the enemy, and the demon ancestor's cauldron was too astonishing. Of course, the main thing was that the divine blood banner itself was full of cracks. It was damaged quite badly back then. Even so, everyone realized that this demon ancestor's cauldron was too powerful. Only the top 10 sect-guarding weapons could contend against it. Unless the top 10 used supreme weapons that protected their mother planet and wouldn't be mobilized easily, other weapons simply wouldn't do. Only now did people realize that the old monster from the Netherworld race turned around and ran while riding the bone dragon. This wasn't cowardice, but rather decisiveness. The indestructible Vajra, whose body had been blasted through and who still wanted to rely on numbers to kill Yao Yao's grandfather, felt terrified at this moment. He originally wanted to find an opportunity to kill, but now he hurriedly escaped. However, Yao Yao's grandfather had already attacked him. At this moment, he resonated with the demon ancestor's cauldron as though they had fused into one. Both of them shone and erupted with boundless divine radiance. With a boom, the man and the cauldron charged over together. Yao Yao's grandfather carried the large cauldron and smashed it onto the indestructible Vajra's body. Among these people, the indestructible Vajra's defensive power was the most shocking. Because his body was made of metal, he was sturdy and indestructible. He had even swallowed some rare divine metals and even a small amount of mother gold to evolve. However, all of this was useless. Now that he was smashed, his entire body exploded into a ball of light. The machine race's Vajra bellowed furiously and let out a roar of his soul. He was filled with unwillingness. But in the end, he was powerless to reverse the situation. As he was torn into pieces, his soul emerged from his metal body. Boom! The large cauldron smashed down once again and struck his soul. The indestructible Vajra let out a mournful howl as all kinds of strange phenomena appeared in this part of the starry sky. Blood-colored lotuses bloomed, layers upon layers of ghostly shadows, and a black whirlwind suddenly appeared in the universe. Pff! His soul exploded and vanished in a puff of smoke. At this moment, did the others still dare to stay here? All of them were fleeing. After the corpse-like old man grasped this cauldron, his combat power increased sharply. Who could contend against him? Among the top 10, even the sect-guarding treasures of the strongest races in the top 10 were needed to block this cauldron. Everyone knew that after reaching this level, this kind of cauldron could increase the controller's energy by at least 4 times. It was absolutely terrifying. The Heaven Illuminators were all retreating and didn't dare to face him head-on. This scene shocked everyone in the universe. They felt that it was inconceivable. It turned out that the most powerful evolvers in their hearts could also be afraid and didn't dare to face him head-on. Chi. The Sage Master made his move. He used his domain techniques to force out the old monster from the Sky Piercer who was hiding in the dark. He wanted to seal off all of his escape routes. Without a doubt, this old monster's strength was unfathomable. He didn't give up and still wanted to assassinate him, but after being discovered, he was decisive and turned to leave. However, Yao Yao's grandfather was extremely savage at this moment. The vicious side of his battle instincts appeared, and his eyes emitted a bloody glow. The mouth of the cauldron was aimed forward, and a thick beam of light flew out. It was accompanied by primal chaos lightning and directly blasted over. The old monster from the Sky Piercer sucked in a breath of cold air. He was actually locked onto by some kind of rule. Helpless, he waved the blood-colored divine sword in his hand once again. A loud clang rang out and sparks flew in all directions. In the end, there was even a cracking sound as a third of the sword's body broke. Moreover, the lightning was transmitted into his body. Bang! Half of his body was covered in blood. He had been seriously injured. The old monster from the Sky Piercer was so distressed that he wanted to die. The most powerful weapon of their assassin organization was too seriously damaged. Who knew how many years it would take to be nourished in a blood pond to recover? Boom! The next moment, Yao Yao's grandfather soared like an immortal bird and split the starry skies of the universe. He flew over with the cauldron in hand at an extremely fast speed, and even time seemed to be distorted. Let's go! The old monster from the Sky Piercer was, after all, a person of great merit and fortune. His own strength was extremely powerful. He forcefully used the broken sword to cut open the Law-Rune's lock and charged into the wormhole. Boom! At this moment, Yao Yao's grandfather threw out the large cauldron and smashed it into the wormhole. A huge explosion immediately occurred there. Ah! This was the first time in his life that the old monster from the Sky Piercer had suffered such a huge loss. Since he was young, he had always been the one assassinating others and making them fearful. Today, it was his turn to be in danger and being hunted down. His body was struck by the large cauldron and broke apart inch by inch. A rain of blood sprayed everywhere, and in the end only his head was left. The broken sword turned into a ball of red light and quickly disappeared. Even the Sage Master was sighing. What a pity! Everyone in every corner of the universe gasped in surprise. The old ancestor from the Sky Piercer was actually almost completely killed. Many people felt that it was a pity. If he was killed, this assassin organization would be completely finished. At this moment it was quiet here. When Yao Yao's grandfather turned around to look for his opponents again, all of them had run away. Not a single one was left. Roar! The old man roared and chased into the starry skies with the cauldron in hand. However, he staggered along the way and a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. He was also injured after the consecutive battles. Following that, he lifted up the great deity who was being carried along with the cauldron. No. The great deity's hair stood on end. He felt incomparably sullen. Today's battle made him want to go crazy. He had been carried by someone and treated as a weapon. In the end, Yao Yao's grandfather tore him into two. Then he used the large cauldron and smashed it down abruptly, turning him into a bloody mist and flying ashes. After that, Yao Yao's grandfather chased into the starry skies once again. "That's not right. Uncle, let's stop. Don't chase after them." The Sage Master was on alert. He felt that there was danger in the depths of the universe and that there were old monsters lying in wait. He was afraid that someone from the 10 Greats would come with their sect-guarding weapons. That would be troublesome. It was hard to predict who would emerge victorious. The main reason was that Yao Yao's grandfather had already lost himself and wasn't in a normal state. Yao Yao came out of the copper coffin. She successfully calmed the old man down and didn't chase after them, but she couldn't wake him up. At this moment, Chu Feng's emotions were fluctuating. This time it actually ended like this. The native evolvers had beaten the Outer Realm Alliance until they were scattered. It was truly unimaginable. He quickly opened the jar in his hand. Inside was the pollen of the weaponry refinement sacred tree. Then he poured it on a piece of mother gold with extremely vigorous yang qi. This was left behind by Yao Yao's grandfather before he left. He told him that if he couldn't return on time, he could do this. Earlier, Chu Feng didn't make a move because the Sage Master was accompanying Yao Yao's grandfather in the Outer Realms. He didn't need to worry. Now that the battle was over and they weren't chasing after the enemy, Chu Feng's actions wouldn't affect the battle in the Outer Realms. Qi, the mother gold was melting with astonishing mysterious runes hidden within. Then it soared with wisps of flowing light and rushed into the cosmos. It attracted the mother gold in Yao Yao's grandfather's body and resonated with it. The curtains fell on the battle of the gods. The starry skies shook. Who would have thought this would be the result? It shook the outer realms. The whole world was boiling. Every race was in heated discussion. The whole starry skies were clamoring. However, the Sage Master was sighing. They were the losing side in the ancient battle back then. It seemed like their friends, old friends, and allied forces had been wiped out. In the present world, those people could no longer appear. The Sage Master was very sad. Although he had scared away those top-notch experts, it couldn't hide Earth's decline. Now, only he and Yao Yao's grandfather were left to fight. Not long after, Yao Yao's grandfather sensed something. He roared and howled with blood-red eyes, but in the end, he turned around and flew toward Earth to Mount Jijin. This time, the Sage Master naturally followed Earth and descended together. He was afraid that Yao Yao's grandfather would go crazy and destroy everything here. Yao Yao also returned and sat on the bronze coffin. In the end, with her around, her grandfather gradually calmed down and didn't continue to go crazy. Sage Master Yao Yao, old man. Chu Feng stood in front of Mount Jijin. He was incomparably excited as he welcomed them here. There was another person behind him. It was Yao Yao's grandfather's reincarnation from a drop of blood, Overlord Chu. Next, Overlord Chu addressed Chu Feng. It almost scared him out of his wits and made him feel like his head was about to explode. Chapter 738. When he heard this form of address, Chu Feng felt a chill run down his back. He didn't dare turn around to look at Overlord Chu. Instead, he revealed a smile that was uglier than crying. He decisively changed the topic. In an instant, his face was brimming with enthusiasm as he welcomed Yao Yao and the Sage Master. However, Overlord Chu was very stubborn. Seeing that Chu Feng didn't respond, he called out, "Second brother," again. Moreover, he walked from behind to the front. This time, he was quite clear and no longer spoke incoherently. Yao Yao and the Sage Master heard and saw clearly. Yao Yao's entire body was glowing white. She was so beautiful that it was unreal. Calling her an exiled fairy wasn't enough to describe her elegant demeanor. She was truly charming and exceptionally beautiful. In ancient times, she was number one under the starry skies. Not only was she talented and powerful, but she was also the number one beauty of that time. Many years had passed, but her black eyebrows were curved and her eyes were like limpid autumn waters. She was still peerless and incomparably beautiful. At this moment, there was a faint smile between her red lips and pearly white teeth as her beautiful eyes stared at Chu Feng. "Yao Yao, I miss you very much. It's been so long and I've always been very worried." At this moment, Chu Feng threw caution to the wind. He was very thick-skinned and incomparably mushy as he approached. That was because there was simply no solution to the current situation. After all, Overlord Chu's brain wasn't bright and he was exceptionally stubborn. He actually walked down the dark path and was still greeting Chu Feng. "Is that so?" Yao Yao's faint smile revealed a state that could topple cities. Her figure was graceful, and she came over nimbly like a divine lotus swaying in the wind. Then, she pursed her lips and said, "Since that's the case, let's go for a walk in the forest. I want to listen to your complaints." Although her big eyes were quick-witted and she pursed her lips with a smile, Chu Feng was scared. She definitely wanted to ruthlessly tidy him up. Chu Feng decisively changed the topic again. He looked at the Sage Master and said, "Sage Master, you're the hero in my heart. You're the bright lighthouse on my road ahead and the target I'll strive to surpass in the future." The Sage Master was very gentle. His eyes were deep, and he had a head of shiny silver hair. He was rather handsome as he smiled and nodded at Chu Feng. "The old man's situation isn't right. I have to go and comfort him first. I'll put him to sleep in the bronze coffin." Clang! The lid of the bronze coffin opened. Then, the Sage Master brought Yao Yao's grandfather along with him and disappeared from this place. They entered the depths of the earth. "Second brother!" Overlord Chu called out again. This time, Chu Feng really wanted to cry. Now, only his sworn brother, Yao Yao, and him were left. Even the Sage Master, a good-tempered person, had temporarily disappeared. What should he do? "Yao Yao, there's a misunderstanding here," he hastily explained. "Let's go over there and tell me." Yao Yao's sparkling and translucent jade-like hand very naturally rested on his shoulder. She blossomed with divine light and enveloped him as she left with extreme speed. "Big brother, no, grandfather, save me!" Chu Feng shouted at Overlord Chu. Overlord Chu was immediately stupefied. He stood where he was and tilted his head as he pondered for a long time. He looked absent-mindedly at Yao Yao's back. This caused Chu Feng to scream and disappear from the place. Chu Bawang did not pay attention to him or stop him. Not long after, lightning flashed and thunder roared in the depths of the mountain forest. Behind the mountain, thunder shook violently. Chu Feng did not come out for a long time. There was a huge commotion in that area. At Mount Eternal in the Eastern Sea, a group of great demons was on their way. They were incomparably excited. They had contacted Chu Feng earlier and already knew that the matchless old man was released by him. Therefore, this group of people had come. With the big black yak as the leader, he activated a large spatial ship and brought a group of brothers here to recognize him. They wanted to celebrate this great victory together. When they arrived, they just happened to see Overlord Chu standing there alone. He seemed to be deep in thought and recalling something. The big black yak's eyes were sharp. He saw him from far away and was immediately overjoyed. He said, "There's no need to say anything. This must be our sworn brother." He jumped off the battleship, tidied up his black suit and combed his swept-back hair. He rushed over with large strides and said with incomparable enthusiasm, "Big brother." Although the big black yak was in human form, he retained a pair of large horns this time. At this moment, he shook his head with unbearable enthusiasm as he introduced himself. "Big brother, old yak has come to see you." Then, behind him, a group of great demons, including the Manchurian tiger, Old Donkey, Ouyang Feng, Zhou Quan, and the Horse King, followed suit and called him Big Brother. This group of people's attire was almost the same. Apart from Yellow Ox, the others were all wearing black suits and shiny black leather shoes. Of course, this time, they took off their black sunglasses and didn't have cigars in their mouths to show their politeness. The entire underworld group was uniform as they lowered their heads and called him Big Brother. Overlord Chu raised his head with a stupefied expression. If he wasn't clear-headed in the past, he would probably have slapped them and turned them into minced meat. But recently, he had gradually become more intelligent and could even recall some things from the past. Therefore, he wasn't so irritable anymore. He was a little puzzled and looked at this group of people with a dazed expression. Big Brother, I'm your third brother. I'm called Bull Demon. The big black yak introduced himself. Originally, he was older than Chu Feng, but he hated the title of second brother and didn't want to be the second. So, he directly wormed his way into being the third brother. The Manchurian tiger also came forward and said, Big Brother, I'm your fourth brother. My nickname is Siberia, and my full name is Manchurian. Hee-haw, hee-haw. Old Donkey opened his mouth and called out. In the end, he suffered 6 or 7 hooves in an instant, such as ox hooves, bear paws, and horse hindquarters. He hurriedly changed his address and said, Big Brother, I'm your fifth brother. My name is Lu Feiyang, and I'm 401 years old. You can call me Old Lu. Big Brother, my name is... Such a group of great demons came forward with an entourage in front and behind. They all came together to recognize a relative. This was lively and crowded around Overlord Chu, surrounding him in the center. Only Ouyang the Toad was emitting cold air as he quietly retreated because he saw Yao Yao. That elder sister was walking over gracefully from the mountain forest, scaring Ouyang Feng so much that he shrunk his neck. Just now, he also went forward to recognize a relative. But now he understood. Even if this old man was only an incarnation and was reborn from a drop of blood, his origins were still frightening, and he couldn't address him carelessly. There were clues to Ouyang Feng's origins. It was extremely likely that he came from Yao Yao's family and was related to the most powerful divine beast raised by her race. How would he dare to recognize a relative randomly? At this moment, Yao Yao was like a fairy treading on the wave. She walked on the grass and approached them. Yao, Princess. The big black yak and the others all shivered when they saw Yao Yao. Each and every one of them stood ramrod straight, and a layer of goosebumps appeared all over their bodies. They also saw Chu Feng. They discovered that his clothes were ragged, and his hair was disheveled and his face was dirty. There was something completely wrong with him. These people quickly changed the topic, because they sensed that the situation wasn't good. Brother Chu Feng, what happened to you? Why is your nose and face swollen? There's also a large area that's scorched black. Did you get struck by lightning? Brother, I'm not trying to criticize you, but you'll definitely be struck by lightning if you pretend every day. This is definitely true. A group of old brothers teased him on purpose, and wanted to use Chu Feng as a shield. However, Chu Feng turned around and left this time. He didn't help them take the blame. Cough, I have something to do. You guys take your time to chat. I'll go find the Sage Master. Chu Feng didn't even look back as he charged into the ground. After that, the group of people here shivered. With a boom, everyone began to scatter in all directions. They were ready to rush out of Mount Zhijin and escape back to the Eastern Sea. But in the next moment, lightning flashed and thunder roared. Violent winds blew, and lightning struck the top. A group of great demons wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves. They cried out miserably and emitted black smoke. They were struck until they cried out loudly and trembled all over. They lay on the ground in all directions, and the word miserable couldn't be more accurate. This included the yellow cattle. It was also lying on the ground and groaning. In fact, it could still be considered gentle and quiet. It didn't join in the bustle to recognize its relatives just now, but in the end it was struck by lightning as well. As for Ouyang Feng, he felt even more wronged than Do Yi. He cried out miserably, "Elder sister, immortal, this has nothing to do with me. I didn't randomly recognize relatives. You're my blood sister. Strike those bastards to death. I'll help you keep an eye on them. Ah, don't strike me. It was better if he didn't cry out. Once he cried out, he was struck by even more lightning. His ears and eyes were emitting green smoke as lightning spurted out from his mouth and nose. The old llama was also very wronged. Just like his disciple, the Horse King, his two bald heads were struck black as he lay there with his limbs spread out. Fortunately, the old Grandmaster of Mount Wudong was in charge of guarding the Eternal Island and didn't come. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to avoid being struck by lightning. After an unknown period of time, Chu Feng accompanied the Sage Master and walked out from the small world in the depths of the earth's core. He saw the great demons lying on the ground. They were almost roasted and were groaning here. The corner of Chu Feng's mouth twitched. Just now, he hid underground in the spirit of a fellow Taoist rather than a poor Taoist dying. When he returned and saw this scene, he observed a moment of silence for these people. Chu Feng, this bastard. He's practically going to kill all of us. Ouch. The toad was lying there. Its entire body was still convulsing from being struck by lightning. Arcs of electricity shot out one after another. Yellow Cattle was the only one that received a bit of preferential treatment. After being struck a few times, Yao Yao waved her hand and guided it to her side, so it wasn't electrocuted to a crisp. Chu Feng put on an act and said, "What a scandal! Get up, everyone. The battle hasn't ended yet." The group of people immediately couldn't accept this. The big black yak shouted, "Brother, you're really not particular. You didn't even warn us." The old donkey was even more indignant and said, "Princess Yao, Chu Feng was only beaten into a sorry state. Why did we almost get roasted? This is unfair." Chu Feng went over to beat up the old donkey again. He actually wanted him to go into the water again. Ouyang Feng's nose spewed out electric arcs as he said, "Yes, yes. It was Chu Feng who called us over. He told us earlier that we must be well educated and reasonable and call the old man Big Brother." Chu Feng's eyelids twitched. He stepped on Ouyang Feng's mouth and said, "Shut up. Do you know what I just experienced? Did I almost go through a complete lightning tribulation? I carried out the most profound reflection. In order to recover, I even ate a 6 paths of reincarnation pill." Everyone was startled upon hearing this and revealed expressions of sympathy. The Sage Master opened his mouth and said, "Chu Feng is right. The battle hasn't ended yet. I think they've returned. They're definitely watching from outside the earth and are unwilling to accept this. But no matter what, they'll be in great pain this time. Some races' rankings are destined to fall." His silver hair was like snow as he revealed a faint smile and said, "That's fine too. We'll attract them here so it'll be convenient for Changming and the others to make their move." He mentioned Uncle Ming. Clearly, he had come into contact with Uncle Ming before coming here. At this moment, Uncle Ming was opening up a second battlefield. He was moving wantonly with a group of people who had escaped from the universe's black prison. They split into several groups and transformed into cosmic bandits. They attacked separately and pounced toward the important areas of a few powerful races. These people all had great origins. They were old saints who had suffered in the past, and many of them were truly ruthless. After being imprisoned for so many years, the resentment in their hearts was too heavy. Now that they had gone crazy, their destructive power was terrifying. At the same time, they recruited a group of desperados from the universe's black market before taking action. They didn't tell them what they were going to do and only said that there was a big business to be done. The group of desperados was only shocked when they actually took action. However, this group of people was even more ruthless. They usually did business without any capital. Now that there was someone leading the way, the returns might make people tremble. Each and every one of them pounced forward like wolves and tigers. "Damn it, let's kill our way in and rob them." In any case, their heaven illuminators aren't at home. Now that they've come out in full force to surround Earth, we'll loot everything clean and then set fire to their old nest. The deity race has a few direct descendants who aren't weaker than their divine sons. Get rid of them all. Damn it, back then those people actually wanted to take my grandson as a servant. I'll cripple him if he doesn't comply. Today I'll destroy them. Let's go and kill them. Take advantage of the chaos. Who's going to the spirit race with me? I heard there are divine medicines there. Let's uproot their medicinal fields. Old brothers, is there anyone going to the Shilin clan? There are some treasures and divine trees brought from ancient Earth there, but it's possible that the former number 9 under the starry skies, Wei Heng, is overseeing it. Do we have any peerless saints here? If we can stop Wei Heng, we can just wipe out the Shilin clan's clan Lord Wei Shilin the moment of his death and snatch away all their fortunes. In some people's eyes, the deity race and the netherworld race had deep foundations. They could only launch sneak attacks and rob after the fight. They would have to run after setting fire to the place because the waters were too deep. But the Shilin clan was definitely a big fat piece of meat. Wei Shilin had just died in battle, and the clan didn't have any ultimate sect-protecting weapons. They could take advantage of the fact that the other veteran races hadn't reacted yet to rob and swallow everything here before everyone else. Of course, the premise was that someone could get rid of the number 9 under the starry skies, Wei Heng. Don't worry, I reckon Wei Heng will run away in advance. He's afraid that the Sage Master will find him to settle the score. Kill. Everyone, let's form a group. We're going to the machine race. Legend has it that the race has a divine pond and the divine indestructible elixir within can help one refine an indestructible body. Kill. Chapter 739. A few vague figures appeared in outer space. Each and every one of them had a terrifying aura. When their eyes opened and closed, they could reflect the falling of the sun and moon and the collapsing of the starry sky. They were gods, ancient existences that had to be worshipped on the altars of every race in the universe. They were the veteran heaven illuminators. The Sage Master was right. Those who left in defeat were unwilling and indignant. Facing a lost monster, they were actually beaten into a complete mess. Blood splashed across the starry sky, and they were thrown off their helmets and armor. They wanted to come back and take a look. These people were all top-notch experts. Some of them were antiques and living fossils who had lived for a long time. Naturally, they understood that Yao Yao's grandfather's condition wasn't right and that there might be strong sequelae. Perhaps they could wait for an opportunity. The Sage Master sensed it, but he was fearless. At this point, Yao Yao's grandfather had come into being, and he had found a life-prolonging medicine for him. If he really hardened his heart, he could totally go all out and fight. Perhaps they still couldn't confront all their former enemies head-on, but no orthodoxy could stand it if they secretly went to their door one by one. The only pity was that Yao Yao's grandfather's mind wasn't clear. This was the biggest drawback. Will the deity race be squeezed out of the top 10? The Sage Master smiled. At this moment, he used his hand to push aside the magnetic mist around Mount Zhijin and gazed at the outer realm. His relaxed attitude caused the expressions of some people in the outer realm to change again and again. Some were happy while others grieved. They were worried that their race would be the next to suffer. After all, they had dealt a ruthless blow to the earth back then. Sage Master, you're so confident. Aren't you worried that I'll destroy your mother planet and all the living beings here? Said an old man. He was hiding in the primal chaos, but his eyes were terrifying like boiling magma. They were blazing and threatening as they shone upon the outer realm. They were boundlessly vast. This shocked everyone because those eyeballs could be compared to the earth. The Sage Master said calmly, "The purgatory is on this planet. Do you dare to destroy it? If you really have that kind of courage, then try." It's not like there weren't people who wanted to destroy the earth back then, But didn't they all escape in the end? Once these words were spoken, the outer realm was silent. The purgatory was on earth. If it were to be destroyed again, who knew what would happen? There was a huge problem back then. There were heaven illuminators who almost fell because of it. However, back then, they had stopped in time and did not continue. The sage master opened his mouth again and said, "You dare to threaten me like this? In reality, you are reminding me that if you provoke us, we'll go to the star field where you're from and destroy your foundation. We'll blow up your mother planet. Let's see if you still dare to be arrogant then." An old monster from the netherworld race riding on a bone dragon also arrived. After hearing these words, his body stiffened on the spot. Their race was the most worried. Back then, the netherworld race was one of the main forces. Now, if they were to be retaliated, they would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. As for the deity race, they had deep foundations and were known as the top 10 ultimate weapons in the universe. If they were to really go all out, they would probably be extremely terrifying. The old monster from the netherworld race had a gloomy expression on his face as he said, "I Chen, if you act recklessly, I don't mind risking my life. Even if I have to suffer a backlash from the purgatory for destroying this planet, I don't care. We will visit those who dare to threaten this planet one by one. One day we will collect all old debts," the sage master replied calmly. Such a simple conversation made the peak experts from outside this region shiver inwardly. The sacred expert was gently lecturing and threatening, but he was also negotiating, targeting everyone. All the powerhouses were fearful and actually somewhat worried. No one would have thought that the planet that had been destroyed in the ancient war would inexplicably become so powerful today. A monster had come into being, and the sage master had survived with great difficulty. Moreover, he was a heaven illuminator. This caused a haze to appear in the hearts of the people from the outer realms. Especially today's battle, it was destined to have far-reaching effects. It would rewrite the existing power structure. Everyone realized that the sage master's words just now had a deeper meaning. He wasn't saying it casually, nor was he threatening them casually. Even saying that the deity race would most likely fall out of the top 10 was a reminder to everyone. As a result, there might be a boundless rain of blood. That was because if someone from the top 10 were to fall, it would definitely be an extremely terrifying matter. Would some of the old orthodoxies and the top-ranked races dispatch troops at this critical moment and divide up the deity race? Without a doubt, the heavenly treasures and cultivation resources accumulated by the races that were once ranked in the top 10 were too abundant. Anyone would be envious. If some races suddenly declined overnight, their own strength would not be able to match the star system they ruled. Then, the divine medicines and supreme scriptures that they possessed would most likely not be able to be kept. They might be massacred by others and then taken away. Everyone, the storm is coming. Are you ready? The sage master played down this sentence once again. Previously, people might have been contemptuous and didn't care, but now they were cautious and thought of the seriousness of the problem. After today's battle, the situation of some races would change. For example, the spirit race. After the death of their old ancestor, would they still have a heaven illuminator? Another example was the deity race. After the death of the great deity, their race did indeed have an expert, but he had been blown up by the sage master in the battle a few months ago, and his realm had fallen. Had he already recovered? If this race didn't have an even more powerful old monster overseeing it, then this race might be targeted by a group of tigers. In reality, the universe could no longer be calm at this moment. Every great orthodoxy and a few large platforms were in heated discussion. They were discussing the rankings of the races in the universe. Today's battle was truly too unexpected. Many evolvers knew that the rankings of some powerful races were about to change. Will the netherworld race still be ranked 11th? They'll definitely fall. Will they return this position to the descendants of those evolvers from ancient Earth? This was a hot topic, and countless people were debating it. Everyone, I think the deity race will be in the most difficult situation. They might be divided up by the Tao race, the origin demon race, and the demon race. If the quasi-immortal race and the Buddhist race also make a move, they'll definitely face a great calamity. It was impossible for such a topic to not cause a sensation. The spirit race must be dumbfounded. Who told them to be so ostentatious? In the end, the spirit ancestor was killed in both body and soul. Not to mention ranking in the top, they most likely won't be able to stand in the top 100. At this moment, countless people were convinced that even though the earth was still recovering, it would ascend to the ranks of the strong after this battle. The sage master had confirmed that he could continue living, and Yao Yao's grandfather had unexpectedly come into being. This was an unimaginably high-end combat power. Some people estimated that the Earth would return to the top 10 in the most conservative rankings. The reason for the deduction was that it was uncertain how long the sage master could extend his life. Also, Yao Yao's grandfather was lost, and no one knew if he could wake up. Otherwise, the ranking would be even higher. As expected, it didn't take long before the Black Blood race, the Wormhole race, and the other oldest universal corporations repositioned the Earth, and its rating soared. Their preliminary judgment was that the Earth could be ranked in the top 50. Their considerations were more comprehensive. After all, the Earth had been severed from generation to generation and lacked intermediate evolvers. There were 2 ancient experts with unstable lives at the top of the pyramid, but below them, they lacked the backbone of many eras. This caused a huge sensation. The ancient Earth has recovered and will rise from the ashes. Their ranking has returned. This became the hottest topic. Even though they hadn't reached the 11th place, it was already commendable for them to appear on the rankings and return to their positions. What happened overnight, in particular, could be considered heaven-defying. People were also waiting to see whether the deity race, the netherworld race, and the spirit race would fall in the rankings. Some terrifying ancient hunters were quietly waiting for them to encounter danger. Roar! Suddenly, restlessness came from the depths of the Earth's core. The iron chains in that small world rang incessantly. Something was wrong with Yao Yao's grandfather, and he was about to break free. Even someone as powerful as the sage master's expression changed. He could no longer remain calm. Yao Yao was incomparably worried. She was afraid that something had happened to her grandfather. She couldn't accept it if something unexpected happened. It's fine. The old man is already heaven-defying. There won't be any danger, comforted Chu Feng softly. The sage master said, "We're not worried about the old man. His vital index is ridiculously powerful. I'm afraid he won't be able to control himself and affect the earth." Swoosh. The next moment, the sage master, Yao Yao, and Chu Feng charged into the depths of the earth's core together. In front of Mount Zhijin, a group of great demons climbed up. Even though they were grimacing in pain, their expressions were grave. They were afraid that something would happen to Yao Yao's grandfather. Nothing must happen to this old man at this stage. Otherwise, there was a group of vicious tigers in the outer realms waiting to divide their food. Crack! Underground, that ancient coffin exploded. Yao Yao's grandfather rushed out with scarlet eyes. At the same time, he knocked over the bronze coffin the sage master had left here. Just like that, he let out a low roar and charged out of this small world. The sage master's head hurt. Even his face was pale because once Yao Yao's grandfather rushed to the surface and went berserk on this planet, there probably wouldn't be many people left. He was considering whether or not he should use his domain methods to send Yao Yao's grandfather out of the earth. But if he did that, he might be attacked by the Outer Realms experts and a life-and-death battle would be unavoidable. He felt that the old man's condition wasn't very good and that he might be in danger. "Grandpa, wake up!" Yao Yao called out, full of emotion, over and over again. In the end, her grandfather stopped and the bloody light in his eyes receded quite a bit. Rays of light appeared in the depths of his eyes and flickered alternately with a scarlet ominous glint. "My granddaughter, Yao Yao." He let out a low roar. But in the end, he suddenly rushed out of the small world and charged out just like that. The sage master was overwhelmed with shock because he really couldn't block it this time. The domain lost its effect and Yao Yao's grandfather charged through just like that. The sage master was worried that there would be a great calamity outside and chased after him. Yao Yao and Chu Feng naturally followed him to the surface quickly. "Where is he?" "Kunlun, charge in the direction of Kunlun." The big black yak, Ouyang Feng, and the others were frightened out of their wits. It was too terrifying just now. That kind of aura made them tremble, and they felt like they were about to explode. Chu Feng let out a long breath. Yao Yao's grandfather hadn't completely lost himself and knew how to control his own energy fluctuations. Otherwise, countless people would die if he really did let go. "Why is he going to Kunlun?" Ouyang Feng murmured. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Yao Yao and Chu Feng charged toward Kunlun. At the same time, a group of great demons also charged over. In the outer realms, some people laughed and revealed expressions of anticipation. As powerful as they were, they could naturally see the situation on the surface. They heard Yao Yao's grandfather's roar and knew that his body was in a terrible state. "Let him go crazy. I hope we have the opportunity to kill him," someone said. At this moment, the number of the top experts in the outer realms increased. They had a premonition that a rare opportunity might have arrived. The scarlet killing sword flickered. Even the Sky Piercer's old ancestor, who was on the verge of death and only had a head left, had come again. He was reborn from a drop of blood and his body had recovered. However, his vitality had long since been greatly injured. He carried his killing Dao treasure and hid in the dark, waiting for an opportunity. There was no need to talk about the top experts of the other races. In Kunlun, Yao Yao's grandfather charged straight toward the gates of hell, which was the extremely strange place that frequently erupted with lightning strikes. Back then, when Chu Feng first came to Mount Kunlun, he was once tricked into the gates of hell by the purple gold woodpecker king and suffered a lightning attack. Later on, when Chu Feng escaped from a spatial crack in the purgatory, he discovered that the exit was connected to the gates of hell. Now, Yao Yao's grandfather charged into the gates of hell and charged underground. This made the sage master frown. He knew what this place was and followed inside. After Yao Yao and Chu Feng arrived, they followed that kind of aura in the end. As expected, Chu Feng's guess was right. Yao Yao's grandfather actually followed that path and charged into an ancient mine. It was connected to the purgatory. Chu Feng's expression changed because the ancient mine was too terrifying. Back then, he was tormented quite a bit during the process of walking through it. However, he felt that Yao Yao's grandfather definitely wasn't afraid of those ghosts. He wasn't afraid of the strange and inauspicious things, but if the old man charged in like this, he would directly enter the purgatory. Who knew what would happen then? Up until now, Chu Feng still didn't understand the purgatory's secret. There were certainly many terrifying places that he didn't understand. Chirp, 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 ghost sounds rang out. Following that, the sounds of footsteps and weeping could be heard in the ancient mine. Yes, it's not simple. There's definitely something unimaginable hidden in this terrain. The sage master discovered a big problem. Roar! Yao Yao's grandfather went in and charged into the ancient cave. He let out a loud roar and shook the ancient and strange ancient mine. The ghost sounds all disappeared. Give me the immortal medicine. I want to save Yao Yao. The old man was roaring in a low voice. His voice was unclear, but what he meant was that he had run here to ask for the immortal medicine? Chu Feng was startled. He thought of Yao Yao's grandfather's origin. He came from the Yang realm and didn't belong to this universe. Perhaps he knew the purgatory's ultimate secret. So much so that Chu Feng had always suspected that if he wanted to enter the Yang realm, he might have to walk the path of reincarnation in the purgatory. No matter if he was reincarnated or if he could find another way, it was most likely related to the end of the path of reincarnation. Chapter 740. At this moment, Chu Feng really thought of many things. This place was too special. When he passed through it, he personally felt a demonic aura soaring into the sky. It was strange and terrifying. Now that Yao Yao's grandfather had come and was roaring here, could it be that this place was connected to the Yang realm? Was there someone in charge of guarding this place? Chu Feng suspected this. If this was true, it would truly shock the world. What was the so-called Yang realm like? Could he go there one day to investigate it? However, Chu Feng thought of another problem. The young lady from the Yang realm, she, had an astonishing background. Her clan had peerless experts overseeing it, but she could only study the Yang realm and couldn't find her way there. So much so that many powerhouses in the Yang realm doubted whether the Yang realm truly existed. Under such circumstances, it would be extremely terrifying if someone from the Yang realm was in charge of guarding this place. The waters here were too deep. However, Chu Feng also felt that he might be thinking too much. This place couldn't be managed by 1 or 2 generations, nor was it a place that 1 or 2 peerless experts could guard. He shuddered at the thought of the radiant city of death and the millstone that could even crush a saint into a bloody pulp. Even the corpses of the Phoenix race, the Dragon race, and other heaven illuminators were crushed into a bloody pulp. At the end of the reincarnation road, there was a black abyss and an ancient cave on the other side. Additionally, there was a clay idol. The more he thought about it, the more he felt it was terrifying. Roar! Yao Yao's grandfather roared. After rushing in, Chu Feng quickly told the sage master and Yao Yao what had happened last time. Then, the sage master's expression changed, and he immediately followed. Chu Feng took out the stone box. There was still some reincarnation fire inside. He had intentionally left it behind in hopes that he would return to the radiant city of death to take a look one day. He and Yao Yao entered the cave too. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Suddenly, a strange sound rang out as if millions of little ghosts were whispering. Even with the sage master beside him, Chu Feng felt a chill penetrating his bones. It was the same as the first time he came here. Then, he opened his fiery eyes, but it was the same as last time. This place was too strange. Even the strongest eye technique was useless as he couldn't see through it. However, he could truly feel that something had appeared in this place and was blowing cold air at his neck. Moreover, at this moment, the sage master let out a cold snort and suddenly brandished the star-studded whip in his hand. With a bang, the void exploded and a strange scream rang out. Even so, Chu Feng did not see what it was. Then, he felt a wave of speechlessness. His body was pitch black, covered in many small handprints, unknown what it was that left behind. Under a sacred expert's eyes, these things dared to mess around. Chu Feng felt his scalp tingle. He looked at the reincarnation fire in his hand. It was really like a bean. The flame was too small and might not be able to suppress the evil spirits in this place. At this moment, the sage master stopped, and so did Chu Feng and Yao Yao. Yao Yao's grandfather stopped in front of them. A short distance away, they would enter a crack in the void, which was the secret room Chu Feng had seen before. In there, some experts from tens of thousands of years ago were scared to death. However, Yao Yao's grandfather didn't go in. He didn't want to enter purgatory, but rather, he was at the fork in the mine. He was shouting and roaring at the depths of the mine. Chu Feng was shocked because he saw Yao Yao's grandfather's body flourish with light when he suddenly roared. His whole person was as resplendent as the sun. At this moment, the sage master hurriedly released a protective divine light to protect Chu Feng and Yao Yao, blocking the front. The old man seemed to have gone mad. Then, Chu Feng saw something indescribable for the first time. A layer of dazzling protective yang qi shone on Yao Yao's grandfather's body, illuminating some things. There was a little girl running, and there was also a huge monster letting out a long howl. Originally, even the fiery eyes couldn't see them, but now they were visible under the blazing yang qi. These things were actually extremely daring. They surrounded Yao Yao's grandfather, pressing and slapping him. Chu Feng immediately knew where the little handprints on his body came from. Roar. Following Yao Yao's grandfather's roar, those things, those strange shadows, all exploded. However, this seemed to be a special kind of energy. After they exploded, they rapidly reassembled and turned into little girls, beautiful women, and various monsters. They pounced forward once again. Bang! Yao Yao's grandfather didn't care about these things anymore. He charged into the depths of the abyss-like mine and roared again, "Give me immortal medicine!" Finally, even the sage master felt cold, and all the hair on his body stood on end. Chu Feng was convinced that Yao Yao's grandfather wasn't rushing toward purgatory. He was only targeting something in the depths of the mine. At this moment, even the sage master was shocked. Back then, he was born on ancient Earth and had lived in Kunlun for a long time. He didn't know there was an ineffable existence here. All he knew was that this path was very dangerous. Let's go and take a look. The sage master naturally didn't feel at ease letting Yao Yao's grandfather go in alone. He was afraid that an accident would happen to him. This pit was very deep. To be exact, it could be considered an abyss. As they walked in, the sinister and chilly aura practically froze one's soul. Chu Feng trembled. Back then, he didn't dare to investigate and didn't look much when he passed by. Now, he was convinced that it was a wise choice. This abyss was several kilometers deep. As they advanced, it was boundlessly dusky. One couldn't even see one's fingers if one stretched out one's hand. There were no longer the chirping of ghosts along the way. It was completely silent. But this was even more terrifying. On the way, they saw a layer of dried bones on the ground. After they stepped on it, it made a crisp sound as it fell apart and shattered. After that, Chu Feng simply didn't dare to believe his eyes. He saw half a dragon's head here. It was sparkling and translucent, carrying the most sacred radiance. Even though it was covered by a thick layer of dust, it still emitted a brilliant luster. Chu Feng had a feeling that this could possibly be a true dragon. A terrifying existence had been killed here, leaving behind half a skull. The sage master trembled and said, "This is a heaven illuminator expert who died here." Chu Feng and Yao Yao were shaken when they heard this. What kind of place was inside this deep pit? The sage master said again, "These deceased remains are at least 5 million years old. They were considered experts at that time, or even older. It's possible that they're more than 10 million years old." An indescribable war had taken place on the mother planet hundreds of millions of years ago? This was far before the ancient times. At that time, the evolvers on this planet had yet to rise, yet such a major event had already taken place. But no one in the universe knew about it. There were no records at all, and the outside world didn't know about the terrifying war here. Chu Feng suddenly recalled that he had picked up the stone box and the 3 seeds from Mount Kunlun. Could it be related to the war in ancient times? Looking at this half-a-dragon's head, he recalled that the #1 expert of the dragon race from hundreds of millions of years ago, who was also the strongest expert in the universe at that time. Before his death, he had deduced the topography of Kunlun and suspected that he had found what he was looking for. But at that time, the universe's #1 expert was in the process of passing away and couldn't find the Earth's exact coordinates. The battle here was caused by the experts of later generations following the dragon race's #1 expert's engravings before his death. Or could it be that it had already taken place before the dragon race's #1 expert had deduced it? For a moment, a myriad of thoughts ran through Chu Feng's mind. Don't touch the bones here. They're highly toxic. The sage master warned Chu Feng not to touch them carelessly. Chu Feng was embarrassed and immediately stopped in his track. Originally, he was going to wipe the dust off the half-a-true dragon's head and put it away. This thing was definitely a precious material for refining weapons. The dark abyss was originally pitch black and ordinary energy couldn't release splendor here. But with the sage master here, everything wasn't a problem. The universe's #1 poisonous insect. At this moment, the sage master sucked in a breath of cold air as he stared at the remains on the ground. It was 300 meters long and couldn't be considered particularly large, but it was rather sinister. It had the head of a snake, the body of a spider, the 100 legs of a centipede, the tail of a scorpion, and the lumpy old skin of a toad. Its entire body was golden and extremely glaring. So many years had passed, yet it was still vivid and lifelike. There's actually such a thing. The Sage Master's expression was solemn. According to the Sage Master's explanation, this was the product of a poisonous insect's evolution to the highest level. It was known as the universe's #1 poisonous insect. When it was weak, it could be a poisonous snake, a scorpion, or a centipede. It evolved from an ordinary poisonous insect until it matured to its ultimate state and transformed into this appearance. This was the ultimate form of a poisonous insect. Its poison was specialized in corroding souls and could poison heaven illuminators to death. It was a truly incomparably terrifying creature. Generally speaking, it was hard to find one even in tens of millions of years. Its corporeal body can resist the attack of a heaven illuminator powerhouse. As for its soul poison, there's simply no cure for it. The Sage Master's expression was solemn as he felt more and more how terrifying this place was. It was actually on Earth, and they didn't know it back then. There was a fatal wound on the head of the ultimate poisonous insect. It was a sword mark that pierced through its skull and crushed its spirit. It left it with an empty shell and died here. The evolver who can kill it with one sword is very terrifying. It's extraordinary. The Sage Master was incomparably solemn. The #1 poisonous insect was considered a taboo existence in the universe. Even the old ancestors of various sects didn't dare to provoke it unless they took out the top 10 sect-guarding weapons to kill it. Chu Feng was a little numb. He had seen half a true dragon's skull and the ultimate poisonous insect. This place gave him too many surprises. As they advanced, there were more and more bones in the abyss. Not only were they everywhere, but there were also some indescribable corpses hanging on the stone walls. It was hard to imagine what kind of battle had happened here back then and how many people had died. People from the Yang realm. Yao Yao spoke as she stared ahead. There was a spacious area in the abyss that looked like a battlefield. Yang Qi surged and dispersed the sinister atmosphere from before. There were many glowing corpses here. Even though they were dead, they were still emitting Yang Qi like active volcanoes. Their blood Qi surged like smoke signals and rushed straight up. Chu Feng sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "Are these also people who died here millions and millions of years ago?" "Yes." The Sage Master nodded. His body shone and protected Chu Feng. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to bear it. They had been dead for so long, yet their blood Qi was still erupting like active volcanoes, and their Yang Qi was so dense that it was boiling. This was simply unimaginable. "These are powerhouses from the Yang realm who died here in battle," said Yao Yao. Needless to say, these were existences at the Heaven Illuminator realm, at the very least. There were 12 corpses lying on the ground. Some had their skulls ripped open, some had terrifying bloody holes between their brows, and some had been cleaved in half. Suddenly, the Sage Master stopped. Chu Feng and Yao Yao also stopped. That was because the old man in front of them was standing there motionless. At this moment, they had already reached the end of the abyss, and there was no way out. A pair of huge silver doors blocked their way. They were thousands of meters tall and sturdy. Even though millions of years had passed, they still had an ice-cold luster as they blocked the path ahead. Near the silver doors, half of a dragon's bone had been clipped off. When they closed the doors back then, a terrifying expert from the dragon race had been twisted in half. Chu Feng was terrified. He thought of the half-dragon's skull he had seen earlier. It matched the ones here. What was this place? He was shaken. He had followed Yao Yao's grandfather ineffably to the bottom of the abyss and actually saw such a terrifying truth. Don't tell me the Yang realm is really connected to the back of this silver door? Said Yao Yao. Chapter 741. The huge silver door, the remains of the true dragon's corpse, as well as the Yang realm's corpses that were erupting with Yang energy like a volcano, made the bottom of the abyss astonishing. Roar! Yao Yao's grandfather also seemed to be hesitating, but in the end, he still let out a loud roar and resolutely attacked. He lifted the large cauldron in his hand and smashed it toward the silver door. Chu Feng's pupils constricted, and his eyes widened. This was because he had overlooked something. Did Yao Yao's grandfather absorb the demon ancestor's cauldron into his body after the great battle in the outer realms? He didn't return it. He could take it back and forth freely. Boom. This large cauldron was used by Yao Yao's grandfather as a brick. He directly smashed it onto the 1,000 feet tall silver door. The movement was too great and the sound was shocking. Not good. The sage master immediately brandished the star-studded whip. At the same time, divine magnet stones and other things fell down with a pitter-patter, blocking in front of them. They formed a large-scale domain and isolated the front. Despite this being the case, this underground abyss still surged with energy, like a tsunami, great waves overflowing into the heavens. At the same time, all types of striped patterns and spiderweb-like traces interweaved on the abyss's stone walls and flourished. There was also a large-scale and terrifying domain that suppressed this place to protect it from damage. Otherwise, how could he have withstood the bloody battle of the powerhouses back then? Dong dong dong, an earth-shaking sound rang out. Yao Yao's grandfather lifted one of the cauldron's legs and swung it like a sledgehammer. In one breath, he smashed it over 100 times. In the end, the demon forefather cauldron could not take it anymore. It felt like it was being trampled upon, and emitted a mechanical voice. Powerful spellcaster, you can be a bit more artistic. After you fuse with me, you can strengthen your sword wheel. It gave a suggestion, feeling that this was too rough. However, Yao Yao's grandfather didn't have much of a reaction. His brain wasn't bright right now. He lifted a cauldron leg and smashed it over 100 times. Dang dang dang. Sparks flew in all directions, heaven-shaking noises sounding. One could see dazzling symbols blossoming there. If it was in outer space, all types of stars would have been blasted apart. This was the energy symbol of a supreme expert. Coupled with the support of the ancestral demon cauldron, it was peerlessly terrifying. Fortunately, this abyss was special. It was supported by a mysterious domain and revived. It was as if it had a life of its own as it frantically devoured all types of energy to prevent this place from being destroyed. At the same time, that silver gate deformed, caved in, full of bumps and hollows, beaten to the point where it was about to break down. Clang! In the end, the silver gate opened wide, releasing a tremendous sound. Endless primal chaos rushed out. In addition, there was also a large amount of yang energy mixed within, surging and surging. Are we really in the world of the living? Chu Feng was alarmed. He felt an unusual aura. The sage master shook his head. He couldn't make a judgment yet. With a whoosh, Yao Yao's grandfather disappeared in a flash and entered the silver door. Chu Feng could only sigh. This old man was too valiant. He used a brick to smash open the door. There was no one else who could be so ferocious. Uncle Sage Master, let's go in quickly. Yao Yao was worried. She urged the sage master to withdraw his domain and followed behind the huge silver door. They also barged in. The yang energy here was extremely dense and terrifying. Ordinary evolvers would definitely not be able to withstand it and would melt here. Chu Feng was greatly shaken because he felt that the yang energy here was even more pure and dense than what was emitted from Lady Shi's body. This was simply like the land of the yang realm. If he didn't have the Sage Master's protection, it would be extremely unbearable for him to stay here. The yang energy was tyrannical and surging like a tide. It was scorching like divine flames. Huh! The Sage Master stopped in his tracks. He was cautious and vigilant as he stared ahead. There were corpses all over the ground, such as the broken bodies of dragons and the corpses of yang realm beings. Their blood energy hadn't dried up and was still spewing out yang energy. It's not the world of the living, Yao Yao said with certainty. They moved forward once again and stopped not long after. They had reached their final destination. The old man stood there with the big cauldron in his hand. He growled, "Give me immortal medicine." The primal chaos ahead was dense, and the yang energy was so dense that it was about to transform into heavenly fire. It was also like a huge volcano erupting, blazing and shocking the world. Graveyard, burial ground. Yao Yao spoke. Her hair was sparkling and her figure was graceful. She stood in the air and stared ahead. They hadn't reached the end of the abyss, but the front was already blocked. A vermilion coffin lay in disarray, emitting an astonishing aura. Yao Yao's grandfather arrived in front and was staring there. "There's someone." Chu Feng's pupils constricted. There was a figure hanging down from above the vermilion coffin. Both of its feet were in the coffin and part of its body was wandering in mid-air. It was strange and terrifying. The primal chaos and yang energy drowned this place. The golden light in Chu Feng's eyes flourished. He was using the fiery eyes, but it was ineffective. There was an indescribable aura here, and the power of order was suppressing everything. Only when Yao Yao's grandfather's entire body flourished with light like a sun burning and illuminating everything did this place gradually become clear. At this moment, even the Sage Master drew in a breath of cold air and felt apprehensive. There was a woman hanging above the vermilion coffin. A white silk was nailed to the stone wall above, strangling her and suspending her there as she wandered about. This was somewhat astonishing. She looked like a hanged ghost. But upon closer inspection, this wasn't the case. Something strange was happening there. The so-called white silk was her shiny silver hair. She was nailed to the stone wall by herself and hung her body. Her back was facing them and she was shedding her skin. That's right, the upper half of her body was hollow and lacked luster. It was even cracked because it was just a piece of human skin with indescribable order patterns. Below it was a pair of fair, exquisite, sparkling, and lustrous legs with exuberant vitality. Half of them had fallen out of that human-shaped skin. Moreover, all the yang energy was emitted from that pair of snow-white long legs. What kind of situation was this? Chu Feng was a bit stupefied. This so-called secret land of the yang realm and surging yang energy were all caused by this woman who was halfway out of her withered skin? Corpse transformation, shedding skin, and ascending to immortality? The Sage Master's expression was grave. His words carried suspicion and he was on guard as if he was facing a great enemy. This should be a corpse left behind from millions of years ago. In the end, she had struggled out of the vermilion coffin and shed her skin here. Was she going to be reborn? This was definitely a strange and terrifying matter. There were similar legends in this universe, but who had seen it before? Some heaven illuminators would try their best to be reborn before they passed away, but who could succeed? They would all die in the end. However, there was a living example here today. This mysterious woman was about to succeed. "She's from the yang realm," Yao Yao said. She was like this even after death, and had such dense yang energy when shedding her skin. She definitely wasn't a creature of this universe. Give it to me. Yao Yao's grandfather was extremely valiant. He didn't care if she was an undead immortal or an unrivaled existence from millions of years ago. He carried the large cauldron forward and was about to smash it down. Chu Feng was moved and astonished at the same time. He felt that Yao Yao's grandfather knew a lot of things. If he hadn't come here in the past, then he must have seen some ancient records and so on. At this moment, even Yao Yao was speechless and revealed a shocked expression. Her grandfather was too powerful and tyrannical. He was threatening this incomparably mysterious woman who was in the midst of transformation. Without a doubt, this transformation had been going on for who knew how many tens of thousands of years. The so-called strangeness in the abyss mine could all be related to her. I don't know which era this mine was excavated by humans. It should be a mother gold mine. The sage master was the most sensitive to topography and made a judgment here. Then he raised his hand and pointed the star-studded whip in front of him. He was ready to make a move at the crucial moment and stood together with Yao Yao's grandfather. Clearly, the shedding female corpse had consciousness and senses. She had long since sensed everything and was extremely furious with a stifled air. She really wanted to flare up. Even in her current situation, she still found it a little hard to bear. What kind of identity did she have? She was actually being threatened. Bang! Yao Yao's grandfather was too valiant. He lifted the brick and smashed it over directly. However, he didn't smash the female corpse's body, but rather the vermilion coffin. Boom! The sound was loud like the explosion of immortal thunder from the 33 heavens. It shook the abyss until it shone and patterns interweave. Even with the protection of the domain, it almost caused the ground to explode. Be gentler. The demon ancestral cauldron emitted a mechanical voice and reminded the old man. It had to be said that the vermilion coffin was very sturdy. It actually didn't collapse. Regardless of whether it was Chu Feng, Yao Yao, or the sage master, they all felt two terrifying gazes burning the world, as if they could incinerate everything. For a split second, the woman seemed to have turned her head and swept a glance at them. However, Chu Feng didn't see it clearly because the skin was shriveled and her real body was still inside the old skin. Take it. In the end, this woman endured and didn't flare up. She didn't land on the ground and fight with her life on the line because she was at the crucial moment of her transformation and couldn't make a move. She sensed that Yao Yao's grandfather wasn't easy to deal with and that the cauldron he was carrying was also very dangerous. Otherwise, she absolutely wouldn't have allowed anyone to set foot here. The vermilion coffin made a cracking sound and the coffin lid slid to one side. A dried-up rotten tree root flew out. It was unremarkable and even looked a little moldy. It floated up just like that and landed in Yao Yao's grandfather's hand. Chu Feng's eyes stared straight. Was this the so-called immortal medicine? In reality, Yao Yao's grandfather used his actions to prove that this should be it because he turned around and left immediately after getting it. The woman who was hanging saw the mother gold chains on his body and once again revealed a piercing gaze that could burn the void. She said, "What a pitiful person. Forget it." She actually made such an evaluation and then withdrew her gaze. It seemed like she wouldn't leave the matter at that in the future even if she gave away the great medicine. However, after seeing that Yao Yao's grandfather had the mother gold in his body, she seemed to have understood many things and shook her head. "Let's go," the sage master whispered. They couldn't stay in this place for long because it was too mysterious. There was actually such a mother gold mine on Earth. Moreover, this woman was hiding inside and blocking the way. They hadn't even reached the end of the mine yet. They rushed all the way out and Yao Yao's grandfather directly handed the rotten tree root to Yao Yao with a gentle expression in his eyes. But very soon, he lost control again. When they were about to reach the surface, he couldn't help but roar at the sky. His roar shook the outer realms. Outside of Earth, The number of heaven illuminators had increased, and they were paying close attention to the stars below. Someone heard this kind of roar and immediately revealed a faint smile. He said, "As expected, there's a big problem with this monster. Say, if we attack Kunlun, will it cause the purgatory to open and cause the monster there to perish? Don't act recklessly. What kind of place is the purgatory? Be careful of setting yourself on fire," an old monster warned. "Don't worry, the deity race is anxious. 2 big shots died in today's battle, especially the great deity. Their entire race is in mourning, shocked, and furious. They brought their race's sect-guarding weapon over. Perhaps it can block the purgatory's backlash. Oh, interesting. Perhaps we can try and see if we can get rid of that monster. He's in Kunlun, so it's indeed a good opportunity," someone echoed. On Earth, over at Kunlun, the Sage Master revealed an odd expression and said, "We'll go underground and return to Mount Jijin. Uncle, before we go, roar a few more times to attract people's attention." He understood those people from the outer realms. Not a single one of them was a good person, especially the surveillance domain he had set up on the moon. Truly and secretly captured those people's movements. He immediately understood what they wanted to do. The Sage Master revealed a meaningful expression. He glanced at the abyss of the Mother Gold Mine and then raised his head to look at the sky outside. The next moment, he used his domain technique and enveloped them in runes. In a split second, they disappeared from this place and returned directly to the underground of Mount Jijin. Boom! Someone from the outer realms attacked. Loud laughter came through and said, "Monster, enjoy slowly." That voice was filled with bone-piercing killing intent. At Kunlun, that ancient abyss shook violently. That female corpse, who was shedding her skin and undergoing metamorphosis for a long time, was immediately furious. She was once again alarmed and disturbed by external forces. Chapter 742. The glaring white radiance rushed into outer space. The snow-white hair pierced through the sky and nothing could stop it. The person who attacked just now had a gentle smile on his face, but in the next moment, his huge body suddenly shook and dodged to the side. Although his body was huge, his movements were vigorous and agile. He dodged with extreme speed and tore through space. The energy he erupted with was too vast. An evolver at this level could shatter the nearby planets and grind them into dust just by spitting out a mouthful of essence chi, let alone their true bodies. But now, something unexpected had happened. Even if he moved quickly and had dense energy to protect himself, the white light that spanned hundreds of millions of meters still pierced through his palm. It was dripping with blood and bones could be seen. Ah! He let out a low roar and suddenly swung his arm. Then, his figure explosively retreated once more. However, the woman in the abyss of Kunlun was clearly infuriated and didn't stop. She had been disturbed again and wasn't going to let it go so easily. The silver light curled up like a galaxy winding around that person's arm. Under his astonished gaze, he struggled with all his might in an attempt to break free. With a ripping sound, half of his arm was twisted off and a large amount of blood sprayed out. Then, the silver hair retreated and the area regained its tranquility. There were many heaven illuminators outside of Earth, and every one of them was extremely powerful. Only a few of them were no more than 9 meters tall and looked like ordinary people. But the rest were terrifying. The smallest was hundreds of thousands of kilometers tall, and some terrifying giant beasts' eyes were bigger than planets and more resplendent than the sun. Such a group of terrifying experts was now extremely shocked and had strange expressions on their faces. This was just a face-to-face encounter, yet an expert had lost half of his arm? It was too fierce. "Ichen, you're quite something. You actually sneak attacked me. Come out and fight if you have enough courage. We'll fight face to face." After a short silence, the injured expert spoke. His eyes were sinister and his large pupils shot out black light like two black suns hanging in the firmament. Earth, under Mount Zhijin. Chu Feng was stunned. The group of Kunlun great demons that had retreated once again also had strange expressions on their faces. Yao Yao wore a smile, and as for the Sage Master, he brought Yao Yao's grandfather into the depths of the Earth's core. Today, there's going to be a surprise? The Manchurian tiger almost shouted in excitement, but he didn't dare to do so. He only communicated with his divine sense. No matter. The Sage Master has set up a domain here. They can't hear us. Yao Yao smiled. How? Moo. The black yak let out an odd cry and raised his head with all his might. He combed his swept-back hair and shook his coarse horns, saying, "Kill these bastards! Hee-haw, hee-haw, that bunch of grandsons are in for it. Beat them up!" Old Donkey bared his buck-teeth and shouted. Chu Feng hadn't expected that there would be such an effect even though they were both silver-haired. That expert from the outer realms had mistaken him for someone else. He was overbearing and wanted to fight to the death. Now, even Chu Feng was praying, "Fight, don't be polite, don't be soft." He had personally experienced it and deeply understood how terrifying that shedding woman was. If she really came into being, she would definitely be able to pierce through the heavens. In outer space, there was a giant bone dragon that flapped its bone wings in the void. Terrifying dark green radiance flew out from its eye sockets as it carried an old monster covered in bone armor on its back. There were also fiery red birds of prey that were even more brilliant than the distant sun. Additionally, there were enormous humanoid creatures wearing armor. They stood tall in the dark cosmos and emitted boundless killing intent. It was boundlessly terrifying. The deity race's people are arriving with their sect-guarding weapons. Everyone, there's nothing to be afraid of. I'll attack first. That person's arm regenerated as he looked down at the deep blue planet below. Then, he decisively attacked. A pitch-black palm pressed down and broke through the Earth's defenses. In reality, the Sage Master had long since withdrawn all the domains and allowed his large hand to stretch down. In the end, this person was somewhat apprehensive. He was indeed afraid of destroying this planet and shattering the purgatory. In the end, the large hand stopped and hung in outer space. In the end, it emitted boundless light which condensed into an energy rune. It fell toward Kunlun to lock onto a target and launch a targeted attack. The next moment, the earth and mountains in the abyss shook and rocks tumbled down. The domain runes left behind millions of years ago all lit up and shone brightly. In the depths of this mother gold mine with a long history that was difficult to trace back to its end, that woman was shocked and furious. She had only given a light punishment just now, but in the end, the people from the outer realms didn't stop and instead became even more severe. If it wasn't for the accident in this cosmos, who would dare slight her with her status? At this moment, she naturally wouldn't say much and immediately launched an attack. This time, she lightly spat out a rune and dispersed the energy the expert from the outer realms had struck down. Then, she used her hair to absorb it. Following that, white light erupted and rushed out of Kunlun. Her killing intent was aroused. Her silver hair was like a waterfall as it rushed toward the sky. She locked onto that expert and immediately attacked to kill. "You still dare to come?" The expert from the outer realms sneered. A light sword appeared in his hand and he slashed at the silver stream with a cold smile on his face. Clang! The next moment, he felt something was wrong. The silver hair that was charging over was too astonishing. Each strand pierced through the void, but the energy it contained didn't gush out. It only erupted when it got close and broke the light sword in his hand. At the same time, the snow-like silver hair pierced through his arm and also his abdomen, dyeing the starry skies with blood. "Everyone, detain him! He actually dares to do this. This is a declaration of war against us," he shouted, suggesting that everyone attack together. However, the next moment, he was horrified. His arm was in intense pain as his flesh was peeled off. The silver hair that pierced through his arm split open his left hand and abdomen, causing divine blood to splatter everywhere. Roar! He let out a loud roar and transformed into a pitch-black monster. He manifested a tough conjured body to defend himself. This was a terrifying monster with dense scales. It looked a little like a hyena, but it definitely wasn't one. It also looked a little like a bayan. Its neck was black, its hands were black, and its fur was very long. There was also a pair of giant black wings on its back. Its beast fur was thick and hard like steel needles. Many parts of its body were also covered in scales. This kind of appearance was very terrifying. Roar! A loud roar rang out. It wanted to break the silver hair, but in the end, under the astonished gazes of others, one of its front legs was torn off. At the same time, its abdomen was cut open. It was dripping with blood, and even the intestines inside could be faintly seen. One had to know that this was a powerhouse at the Heaven Illuminator realm. It was forced to reveal its true form as soon as they exchanged blows, and it even suffered such a huge loss. How could it not be shocking? "Tao friend, let me help you." The old monster from the Netherworld race moved. He rode on a bone dragon and held a death scythe in his hand. He slashed forward with the intention of cutting off the silver hair. "Everyone, let's eliminate him," someone else suggested. A fiery red ferocious bird was incomparably malevolent. It brought along raging flames that surged to the sky and pounced over. The fiery light burned the heavens, and it was too terrifying. This was a quasi-divine bird that had cultivated for an incomparably long time, the Nanming mythical fire sparrow. The fiery light it spat out was very terrifying. It ignited the starry skies, and this was the energy that could destroy all living things. It was the true legendary divine fire, the Nanming mythical fire. With a whoosh, this kind of fiery light swept over, and was still a threat to the silver hair. That Nanming mythical fire sparrow was one of the big shots of the universe pirates from ancient times. It had always liked to plunder, but after so many years had passed and its strength had increased explosively, it rarely made a move because there weren't many things that it fancied. Back then, during the ancient war, it was one of the overlords of the universe pirate. It seized every opportunity and obtained a lot of benefits from the destroyed Earth. As such, it came here this time as well. In reality, the people who made a move did so because they had a guilty conscience. They had once targeted the ancient evolvers here. Boom! At the crucial moment, surging yang qi erupted from the silver hair. It battered away all the Nanming mythical fire and violently curled up. Ah, that black ferocious beast let out a blood-curdling screech. At this moment, its front leg was torn off, its chest and abdomen were split open, and some of the silver hair penetrated deep into its flesh and frantically devoured its life energy. "You aren't a sage master," he shouted. But it was already too late now. Since the woman in the abyss of Kunlun had chosen to make a move, she had no intention of stopping. The black monster's body was severed into two. Clank! At the same time, the silver hair erupted with resplendent rays of light. After it danced about, it collided with the Netherworld race's death scythe. Sparks flew everywhere. It had to be said that this old monster was extremely powerful. Bang! At the same time, the silver hair swung about and violently whipped the Nanming mythical fire sparrow's body. It actually couldn't evade and was enveloped by the yang qi. The silver runes temporarily imprisoned it for a moment, causing it to suffer a direct hit. Its beak opened and fresh blood sprayed out. In just a split second, the experts in outer space were all shaken. Who was this person? He was absolutely not a sage master. He was extremely tyrannical and terrifying, and his accomplishments were terrifying. Everyone, don't worry. Even if this planet is destroyed, I don't think it's a big deal. My race's sect-guarding treasure has arrived. At this moment, A loud shout came from the universe's starry skies. The deity race had arrived with a treasure ranked in the top 10 in the universe, emitting a terrifying aura. "Tao friends, when are you going to make a move?" The monster that resembled both a hyena and a Tao Wu roared. Its entire body was pitch black, and its severed body reformed. It was incomparably furious. Its body had actually been torn apart by a strand of silver hair. This was an extraordinary humiliation to it. However, many people were somewhat stupefied at this moment. They were shocked. When did this planet have another supreme expert? Another terrifying existence at the Heaven Illuminator realm? This was too abnormal. Kill. The overlord of the cosmic pirates, the Nanming mythical fire sparrow, who had regained his freedom and rushed out with surging yang qi, let out a violent shout. He also felt very humiliated. "Everyone, let's kill this person together." In the distance, someone was riding the deity race's treasure. He was approaching this place with great momentum. One of the universe's most powerful ultimate weapons could indeed intimidate the world. That kind of energy-flowing light made the starry skies tremble. All the evolvers along the way were terrified and their hearts palpitated incessantly. In reality, in the depths of the universe, a group of old saints near the deity race's important land couldn't help but want to cry out at this moment. Among them were prisoners who had escaped from the universe's black prison, and there were also villains who had run over from the universe's black market. All of them were incomparably delighted. Uncle Ming shouted, "Old brothers, the deity race's sect-guarding treasure has been taken away. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a great fortune for you and me. Let's kill our way in. As long as we can break into their main camp, those scriptures and divine medicines will be enough for us to benefit for the rest of our lives. We won't have to worry for the rest of our lives." At this moment, Uncle Ming was extremely bewitching, but what he said was also the truth. "Everyone, there are divine medicines here. If you eat one, you might be able to recover your youth and start all over again. You can make another breakthrough, and if you're lucky, you might even be able to find the way to the Heaven Illuminator realm." Uncle Ming talked incessantly and boosted the group's morale. It was as if the group had been injected with chicken blood. "After we're done with this, we'll conceal ourselves. The universe is so big, who can find us? Besides, if we really can't do it, we'll enter the broken universe in the primal chaos. There are great powers there, the banished immortal nest, the primal chaos divine demon palace, and so on. Even the deity race doesn't dare to provoke them. In my opinion, the deity race is finished this time. That expert who took away their sect-guarding treasure is simply a gambler. His eyes are red from losing. This time, the deity race might be consigned to eternal damnation. Let's go, old brothers. Let's do something big. Who knows, we might be able to destroy the deity race today and obtain all of their divine items. The deity race has exterminated countless races in the past millions. They've obtained too many good things, such as the real Kuan Pung true form diagram, divine beast diagrams, and inheritances. The group of old saints and prisoners were stimulated to the point that their blood was boiling. They howled and charged toward the deity race. They were worried that they would fall behind. The other groups had long since charged toward the spirit race and the Shilin clan. They might even make a move now. Outside of Earth, that silver hair danced as she actually resisted the attacks of 5 or 6 experts and exchanged blows with a Heaven Illuminator. However, this was only a lock of hair and not a real person. She couldn't possibly be so heaven-defying. How could she rely on a strand to kill a universe overlord? In the end, she was careless, and a small section of her hair was burned off by the Nanmingli fire. Chi. The bone dragon, the netherworld race old monster, was sitting on breathed out. That was the netherworld flame, also one of the divine flames. It was also aimed at that silver-white glowing hair. Earth, Kunlun abyss. That woman let out a cold snort. Countless years had passed, and she was in the crucial process of her transformation. She was actually disturbed like this. Her killing intent pervaded the air. Back then, she had even killed a dozen powerhouses from the Yang realm who had chased after her. How could such a powerful and tyrannical person tolerate being provoked again and again? Even though it was inconvenient for her to move now, she still attacked tyrannically. Boom! A mass of spiritual origin light appeared and condensed into a human form. Her silver hair was like a waterfall, and her style was peerless. After that, her spiritual body condensed into a physical form and arrived outside of Earth in one step. Bang! It was just a simple punch. The fist seal looked delicate and snow-white, but it directly blew up the bone dragon that was spitting fire and burning her silver hair. The dragon's bones broke into pieces and rushed to various parts of the starry sky. She had come to the outer realms. Chapter 743. Such tyrannical words intimidated the outer realms. Everyone present was an evolver at the Heaven Illuminator realm. At this level, they were naturally extraordinary creatures. They studied all kinds of ancient legends and handwritten notes left behind from ancient times, all for the sake of breaking through again. As such, some of them could more or less understand what she was saying. They were immediately alarmed when they recognized the language she was using. Everyone, why should we be afraid of her when there are so many of us? Look clearly, she's just a spirit constructed from spiritual power. Kill her! The black beast that looked like a hyena and a Taowu roared. It had been chopped in half at the waist, so the ominous glint in its eyes intensified. It naturally hoped that everyone would join forces to eliminate this woman. It was indeed the descendant of the Taowu beast, but it had mutated. Its body was special, but its strength was exceptionally strong. Otherwise, how could it be a heaven illuminator? However, many people were apprehensive and couldn't calm down. They felt that the waters of the azure planet below were too deep. There was actually another ultimate powerhouse here, and they didn't know where she came from in the past. Just as he finished speaking, the woman's incomparably cold gaze locked onto him. Then, without saying a word, she stepped forward and pressed on. Everyone, it'll be a joke if we can't kill her with so many people here. How will we establish ourselves in the future? In the distance, the shattered bone dragon's soul light was throbbing within its skull as it shouted. If the others had suffered such a punch just now, their vitality would certainly have been greatly damaged if their bodies had been smashed apart. However, the bone dragon was special. Its bones were only a carrier, and the soul light was its foundation. The situation just now wasn't right, so it used its huge skeleton to block the attack and successfully let its skull fly away. Its soul escaped the calamity. But now it was rather horrified when it gathered its bones again. The Heaven Illuminator Black Dragon Bone of the West had actually been smashed to pieces. It had only managed to gather a small portion of its bones to become a crippled dragon. As for its master, the old monster from the Netherworld race, he was even more fearful and didn't say a word for a long time. Kill! At this time, the others expressed their stance, and some people attacked decisively. For example, the Nanming mythical fire sparrow flapped its wings. Its fiery red feathers brought about a torrential blaze as it charged forward. However, this woman was even more powerful and terrifying than they had imagined. She seized the initiative to launch an attack in a flash, and she was boundlessly tyrannical. There seemed to be fragments of time beneath her feet. The void was collapsing, and the scene made people wonder if they were seeing things wrongly. Boom! The starry sky exploded. Divine radiance shone resplendently. The woman's spiritual power transformed into a body that pierced through outer space, forming a terrifying silver storm that directly appeared in front of the mutated Tao Wu. Kill! The swan and I roared. The black scales on its body transformed into armor of laws, and the long hair on its neck transformed into divine chains of order. It used its most powerful technique, and in a split second the heavens resonated. Even its figure appeared on some of the altars worshipped by various races in the cosmos. This was the result of the most powerful rune illumination. The mutated swan and I felt apprehension in its heart. It exerted all of its strength to interweave with the order of the universe before carrying out the most powerful attack. At this moment, its body could easily pierce through the universe. It was simply an indestructible body. As long as a celestial body touched it, it would be shaken into cosmic dust. At this moment, it was that powerful. However, in an instant, a jade-white fist arrived before him, and everything was changed. Its black scales exploded, and blood splattered everywhere. The mysterious woman's strength was too strong. Her body was constructed from spirit, and just like that, she struck out horizontally, piercing through its black scales and causing its body to explode. Even its bones were trembling. The demoness is powerful. Everyone attack together. The bone dragon roared from behind. However, its heart was filled with fear. It spat out netherworld flames that were dark green and terrifying. That woman didn't even turn her head. Her snow-white palm slapped behind her, and with a bang the divine flames were scattered. Following which, her momentum became even faster, and she almost pounced on the mutated Tao Wu. She attacked from high up in the sky with a graceful posture. Her white clothes fluttered in the wind, and her style was peerless. However, there was also a boundless murderous aura. The expressions of the others changed, and they had already made their moves. If they attacked together and allowed this woman to kill on the spot, it would be a loss of face for the experts present. For a moment, this place was filled with multicolored lights. All kinds of order runes pierced through the sky. Energy spears, huge golden swords, and other things easily spanned hundreds of thousands of miles. Clang! When the woman's palm collided with the huge golden sword, sparks flew everywhere. Unexpectedly, she could resist it head-on. Clang! Her silver hair swayed about, and the old netherworld monster's black death scythe vibrated incessantly from the impact. It was sent flying high into the distance. At the same time, she opened her mouth and spat out dense yang qi to block the Nanming mythical fire sparrow. She smashed her fist over, causing the vicious bird to let out a long cry. Parts of its body exploded, and a large bloody hole appeared in its chest. Kill! A great battle broke out. A total of several people went forward to kill this woman. There were also people watching with flickering eyes. "You're all courting death," said the woman. Suddenly, she circulated a special breathing technique and used her spirit to breathe. Immediately, her entire body surged with yang qi, and her battle intent surged. Boom! The aura that erupted from her became even more terrifying. Everyone was apprehensive, and she stared at the mutated Tao Wu. She wanted to concentrate on killing one of them first. An ominous feeling arose in the black mutated Tao Wu's heart. It felt somewhat fearful and was suddenly horrified. After reaching this level, its divine senses were unimaginably sharp. It actually felt that it might perish here. "No!" he shouted. The woman was surrounded by others and was still some distance away from him, but he felt terrified and shouted out instinctively. As expected, his feeling wasn't wrong. The woman's fist seal changed and emitted a glaring light. Her fists were like two great suns that illuminated the outer realm when she waved them. On Earth, Chu Feng was in a daze. He recognized at a glance that this was the Yang realm's divine technique, Virokana Fist. Lady she had taught him before, but it wasn't complete. At this moment, this woman was definitely using the complete version. The yang qi was unimaginably dense and its power was peerless. Boom! The starry sky exploded and suns appeared one after another. Then, they exploded and all of them bombarded the mutated Tao Wu. In the end, even though everyone came to the rescue in time and frantically tried to stop it, the black mutated Tao Wu still screamed miserably and exploded. Its blood splattered across the starry sky. The most important thing was that her fist seal was too fierce. It burned the Tao Wu's primordial spirit imprint that had escaped and directly killed it. Ah, the mutated Tao Wu's soul let out a mournful cry and came to an abrupt end. Even it didn't expect to be killed like this. Why would it come here if everything could be predicted in advance? Many strange phenomena appeared in the starry sky. For example, the shadows of fierce beasts that covered the sky and earth appeared and were howling in grief. There were also some divine beasts that were indomitable and roaring along with them. It had nothing to do with me at first. You asked for it, said the woman. At this moment, she suddenly turned around and faced the others. During this process, a sonorous sound rang out from her body and glaring energy bloomed. It formed a protective armor and even condensed into a shield to block some people's fierce attack. Boom! The moment she turned around, she blasted a fist toward the bone dragon. The radiance of the great sun illuminated everything. At this moment, her white clothes fluttered in the wind. Her graceful bearing was extremely moving, but it was also so tyrannical that it made people's hearts palpitate and their hair stand on end. The bone dragon was anxious and truly regretful. It shouldn't have spoken so carelessly. Now it was being targeted by this terrifying woman. Anyone could see that this woman was too evil. Crackle, crackle! This time, the bone dragon's body exploded. That was the bone of a Western divine dragon at the true heaven illuminator level, but in the end it was all shattered. All kinds of cracks and crevices were densely packed together. With a bang, fragments of broken bones flew in all directions. The most important thing was that its skull had also exploded. The bone dragon was originally very powerful and proficient in spiritual attacks, but now it was scared out of its wits. The soul that it was so proud of was melting like ice and snow meeting a fiery divine furnace after encountering such a grand fist seal and a vast amount of yang qi. It immediately understood that this woman's current spiritual state was far more powerful than its own soul and could directly restrain it. Ah, the bone dragon let out a mournful cry. Its soul was burning, and after being swept by this woman's fist, it rapidly melted and then collapsed. The bone dragon was destroyed. During this process, the old monster from the Netherworld race attacked frantically in an attempt to save it, but it was useless. Even though his death scythe struck the woman's body, it only made her stagger and didn't break through. An energy shield appeared outside the woman's body. It was sturdy and indestructible, and its defensive power was astonishing. Everyone, fall back. I'll suppress and kill her. At this moment, the deity race's evolver held the cult's most valuable treasure and transmitted his voice in secret. He was prepared to kill. He let the ultimate weapon absorb enough energy to destroy this woman. Everyone revealed odd expressions and couldn't help but fall back. In the void, a ball of golden light erupted. It was a blade, and at this moment there was nothing else but this blade. It instantly illuminated the firmament. The deity blade, the race's true cult's most valuable treasure, was also one of the top 10 ultimate weapons in the universe. Its power was peerless and could directly kill a heaven illuminator. The great deity had also used a long saber before, but that saber was only an imitation. Although the material was not bad, it was still inferior to the ultimate deity saber that had been refined and nurtured by the true powerhouses of the clan for generations. Chi. Heaven and earth were cut apart. The light was glaring and extremely dazzling. It was as if it was going to cut the solar system in half. However, there was a weakness, and that was that this person wasn't strong enough. He was the deity race expert who was beaten up by the Sage Master several months ago and had once fallen from the Heaven Illuminator realm. Logically speaking, he needed an extremely long time to recuperate before he could recover. Everything was because the race had divine medicines and divine pills brought out from the primal chaos. This allowed him to recover his original realm in advance, but he was still a bit weak. The others revealed odd expressions. They judged that the deity race really didn't have any old monsters. This was the last big shot. The woman's senses were sharp and naturally discovered the deity race expert. With a boom, 2 balls of white divine objects flew over and appeared in her hand. It was a pair of silver doors that were about the same height as her body. She grabbed them with both hands and waved them around. On Earth, Chu Feng and Yao Yao saw it clearly and were speechless. This was the pair of doors in the abyss of Kunlun. At that time, Yao Yao's grandfather used the demon ancestor's cauldron to smash it more than 200 times before it became full of holes. However, it wasn't completely destroyed, which showed how sturdy it was. Now, it had already been restored and was no longer pockmarked. This woman was incomparably domineering. She grabbed a silver divine door in each hand and spread her arms. It was as if she had an extra pair of silver wings, and her aura was terrifying. At this moment, the deity race expert wielded a blade with both hands and hacked down with world-shaking might. The woman was happy and unafraid. She held a silver door in each hand and suddenly waved them. As her arms closed, the 2 silver doors smashed together. Boom! She was calm and collected as she watched the long blade coming closer. Only then did she close her arms and let the 2 doors merge into one before colliding together. This scene was too terrifying because the deity race's expert and the deity race expert were caught in a pincer attack. Without a doubt, the deity race expert felt fear along the way. He wanted to dodge and teleport away, but he was horrified to find that he couldn't break free and couldn't struggle. In the end, he clenched his teeth and increased his speed as he swooped down with his blade. Unfortunately, the 2 silver doors merged into one amidst the dazzling silver brilliance and resplendent divine energy. They collided together and clamped the deity race's expert between them. In a split second, the deity race expert turned into a bloody pulp and was smashed to pieces. The woman's attack method was violent and tyrannical. It was shocking. As for the deity race's blade, it let out a loud clang as it was clamped. The demon ancestor's cauldron didn't completely destroy this pair of silver doors, which showed how sturdy they were. Now that they collided with the deity race's blade, especially since it wasn't the blade's edge but the side, the 2 silver doors were naturally undamaged. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. The deity race expert had mustered a large force and even brought along a great killing weapon. He wanted to launch an attack from the air, but in the end, just as he appeared and was about to kill the demoness, he was counterattacked and killed. Even the Heaven Illuminator's emotions were fluctuating violently at this moment. All of them were dumbstruck and simply couldn't believe that the deity race expert had been killed in a second. Earth, Mount Zhijin. Chu Feng was flabbergasted. He was truly speechless and didn't know what to say. He was shocked, delighted, and incomparably excited. Chapter 744. It was too violent and too tyrannical. A woman of peerless elegance and beauty was carrying 2 giant silver doors. Just like that, she smashed the experts from the deity race who had rushed over at top speed into pieces. Even their ultimate weapons were clamped between them. Clang, clang, clang. The deity blade was known as one of the top 10 weapons in the universe. Its destructive power was astonishing. Even without anyone activating it, it was shaking violently on its own with millions upon millions of layers of murderous intent. Everyone was speechless and shaken. The deity race expert fused with the ultimate weapon and transformed into an eternal blade light as he flew over. Everyone thought this was a swift and fierce attack, a fatal killing move. Who would have thought that he was rushing to his death? In the deep starry sky and the ice-cold outer realm, countless vital planets were separated by boundless distances and scattered throughout the universe. At this moment, the evolvers of every race were shaken. The Heaven Illuminator had died tragically. The deity race expert had come with one of the top 10 ultimate weapons in the universe, yet he was beaten to death. Moreover, he had died in such a sullen manner. It would have been fine if it was a normal battle, but he had died too miserably. His entire body had exploded from the slap and turned into a bloody pulp. It was a ghastly sight. On the deity race's mother planet, many people had been paying attention to the battle outside of Earth. When they saw this scene, the eyes of the race's elders went dark, and some people even fainted. This was a huge blow to the race. They were one of the top 10, yet they had used their sect-guarding weapon. In the end, they were beaten to death as if they were swatting flies. Some of the deity race's elders realized that their race's future was bleak. They had yet to completely revive, but they were already heading toward decline. The race was destined to decline. Their old ancestor, the great deity god, had been beaten to death by Yao Yao's grandfather. This already meant that their glory was gone forever. Now, something like this had happened. They still didn't know that Uncle Ming and a group of old saints were approaching. They were about to set foot on their important land and put on a show of a pack of wolves devouring a tiger. Everywhere in the starry sky of the universe was shaken. Today was destined to be remembered by everyone. Mysterious powerhouses had jumped out one after another from the declining Earth. They were simply going to beat every race into a daze. Yao Yao's grandfather was fine. After all, he had shown his face in ancient times. But who was this woman? Where did she come from? Her demeanor was peerless and domineering. Hee-haw, this battle is truly brilliant beyond compare. It's a fierce battle between a dragon and a tiger, turning the world upside down. Old Donkey expressed his opinion on the Origin Beast platform. His spittle flew everywhere as he explained to everyone. In the end, he concluded by saying, "The above is all nonsense." In fact, he only used one move to slap the deity race's big shot to death. Do you know how he died? His head was caught in the door and he died just like that. At first, everyone was still suspicious, but the more they listened, the more they felt uncomfortable. Especially those from the deity race. In the end, they were simply speechless. This was too sarcastic. The old donkey did his best to advertise and said, "Hee-haw, please remember this moment." The deity race's powerhouse's head was squashed flat by the door. Just like that, he died a violent death. This day was a dark and humiliating day for the heavenly deities. They were walking towards the abyss of depravity, and heaven illuminators fell one after another. The race felt a bone-piercing chill attack them, and when they raised their heads to look at the sky, it was all dusky. Over the years, they had slaughtered the barbarians, destroyed planets, and fought countless battles. They had originally thought that aside from the top 9, they were invincible. Who would have thought that the collapse would be so swift and sudden? The great battle was still going on. Outside of Earth, this woman's white clothes were fluttering in the wind. She was surrounded by the enemy's blood, and the long silver blade between the two silver doors was vibrating violently. The deity blade wanted to fly away. It possessed unfathomable power and emitted light on its own. It even let out a terrifying roar. In the end, a large golden hand suddenly appeared at the hilt of the blade, wanting to pull it out. This was very strange and sudden, and it shocked the surrounding people. Deity summoning. Who's summoning it? The old monster from the netherworld race squinted his eyes and retreated again and again. He already had the intention to retreat and wanted to leave. The others were also astonished. The so-called deity summoning and deity possession were their race's forbidden absolute art. Even the great deity was using them, but where did he summon it from? And who was summoning it at this moment? "It's the deity blade summoning it himself," someone whispered. He had clearly sensed it. Bang! At this moment, the void suddenly collapsed, and a giant golden foot inexplicably appeared. It was majestic and terrifying, and a single foot was as tall as a heaven illuminator like him. It shocked the world. Who knew how many people in the universe were watching the live broadcast? They were all dumbfounded after seeing this scene. In reality, the heaven illuminators in the vicinity of the battlefield were also astonished. Their pupils contracted. Where did this person come from? Very soon, they realized that this wasn't a complete creature. It was as if someone was calling out strongly and using the deity summoning forbidden technique. This was the embodiment of the deity race's secret technique. The deity blade was trembling and rumbling. Millions upon millions of blade lights were about to rush out of the silver door's obstruction and kill the woman before flying away. Bang! Another giant golden foot appeared and stomped toward the woman. Following that, a giant golden fist pierced through the void and charged toward the woman. Interesting! The woman's white clothes fluttered in the wind. She let go of the blade and avoided the blade light to deal with the giant golden foot and fist. Bang, bang, bang! Silver light erupted. When she danced around the pair of large doors, the heavenly wind was vast and mighty, and the universe and starry sky trembled. She tyrannically bombarded the giant golden foot and fist. Everyone, what are you waiting for? Let's attack too. The Nanming mythical fire sparrow didn't dare to speak directly. Instead, he secretly used telepathy to summon everyone to attack together. He didn't dare to hit the head for fear of being targeted by this woman. However, he thought he was doing it secretly, but the woman swept a glance at him as if she had seen through him. It made his heart turn cold and beat like a drum. Bang! At this moment, regardless of whether it was the giant golden foot or the fist, they were all blown up by the woman. They turned into flowing energy and dispersed into the universe. However, the deity blade was very strange. It spun on the spot and shrank from hundreds of thousands of kilometers to the size of a meson. Following that, golden light exploded and was about to disappear. The woman raised her hand to grab it, but a group of powerhouses also moved. All of them were fighting over this weapon that was ranked among the top 10 in the universe. Once they had it, their strength would increase dramatically. The woman was temporarily obstructed, and a wave came from the depths of the universe. With a boom, a super wormhole opened up and the deity blade rushed in. Where do you think you're going? Some powerhouses stretched out their hands, some crossed the void, and some opened their divine eyes to look carefully. The coordinates are the broken universe in the primal chaos. Someone drew in a breath of cold air. He immediately deduced that the wormhole led to the desolate edge of the universe and into the primal chaos. The woman withdrew her hand and muttered to herself, "You have some skill. I wonder if the banished immortal lair, the primal chaos divine demon palace, and the Amitabha temple are still in the primal chaos." The heaven illuminators at the scene were all silent as they gazed at the distant, desolate edge of the universe. At this moment, every part of the universe was boiling. A long time ago, someone had mentioned that the ancestors of the deity race, the Tao race, and the demon race might have come from the broken universe in the primal chaos. Now, looking at this sign, it really was possible. The top 10 might really come from that broken universe in the primal chaos. According to reports, that place is many times vaster than our universe. In the starry sky, countless evolvers were in heated discussion. Rumor has it that the top 10 themselves can't confirm whether or not their ancestors came from the ancient universe in the primal chaos. Only in recent times have there been evidence and clues. Say, the deity blade couldn't have entered the so-called deity palace in the primal chaos, could it? Some people made the connection and immediately drew in a breath of cold air. Of course, there were also people who raised various hypotheses. Recently, the Yang Realms theory was brought up again and again. Some people believed that passing through the primal chaos would lead them to the Yang Realm. Bang! The great battle was still unfolding, and the battle outside Earth hadn't ended yet. The woman's white clothes fluttered as she fixed her eyes on the Nanming mythical fire sparrow and immediately charged over. Moreover, she was carrying 2 doors as she charged over. Even if her white clothes were otherworldly and her style was exceptional, it still made people's hair stand on end. "Tao friends, help me!" the Nanming mythical fire sparrow shouted. It did its best to fight and kill. It couldn't sit still and wait for death. However, at this moment, when people saw this woman carrying 2 doors and charging over, they only had one reaction, and that was to dodge. Some even fled. This was simply like avoiding a god of plague. No one wanted to provoke her. Now, they finally understood that this woman originally didn't want to fight with them. They suspected that she was cultivating on Earth, and was forced out by them. She had already killed 3 great experts, and passed by stepping on the corpses of the deity race, Tao Wu and Bone Dragon. This proved her terrifying style. Who was willing to fight to the death with her? That was because fighting with her could be completely avoided. As long as they didn't disturb her, they would most likely be safe. It was a tragedy for the Nanming mythical fire sparrow. He discovered that he had been abandoned. Not a single person came forward. Those people were all retreating and even running away. Even those who were on good terms with him, and were also big shots among the cosmic pirates, had run away without a trace. He really wanted to curse out loud. Who said that evolvers at the Heaven Illumination realm couldn't get angry, that they didn't have a temper, and that their emotions and desires were extinguished? He wanted to warmly greet those people's families and ancestors. Ah! The Nanming mythical fire sparrow roared and went all out. He transformed into a fiery red divine sparrow and weaved between heaven and earth. He raised his head and spat out the raging flames of rules. He released the power of order and fought to the death. Unfortunately, he wasn't a match at all. With a bang, that woman ignored his attack and slammed down with a door. The impact broke his bones and snapped his tendons. He flew out horizontally and his whole body was covered in blood. The order runes were scattered and countless bones were broken. Following that, another door also smashed down. The Nanming mythical fire sparrow was smashed and his blood splattered across the starry skies. He died a miserable death here and was extremely sullen. Everywhere in the universe was shaken. Countless people were greatly shaken. People had a premonition that the Earth's ranking would most likely soar. It was fine that a monster covered in long black hair had appeared, but now there was a powerful woman. One was more ruthless than the other. The deity race will probably fall out of the top 10 and break the legend of the top 10 never falling. Could it be that the Earth is going to forcefully squeeze into the top 10? Some people were whispering and felt that it was inconceivable. The Earth hadn't completely recovered and the native evolvers were relatively weak. But now, they had one glorious battle achievement after another. It shocked every part of the starry skies and made it impossible for them to calm down. They were boiling over. At this moment, Uncle Ming had already led a group of old saints into the deity race's restricted area. He shouted, "Search the house. Old brothers, don't be polite. Take whatever you like. Everyone, let's go together and fill our stomachs." At the same time, the same thing was happening in the spirit race, machine race, Shilin clan, and other places. Shocking scenes were unfolding. Chapter 745. The deity race, the spirit race, the Shilin clan, and the machine race suffered fierce attacks at the same time. Foreign enemies invaded on a large scale, and for a moment they were killed miserably. The screams of the direct descendants of the major races rose and fell. It was too sudden. How many years had it been since someone dared to attack them? Today, a battle suddenly broke out. A group of saints launched a sneak attack and attacked ruthlessly. Blood splashed in the important areas of several races as a terrible tragedy occurred. Compared to the battle outside of Earth, Uncle Ming was opening up a second battlefield. It had far-reaching effects and was destined to be remembered by every race. That was because this was a subversive battle. After so many years, a declining land could actually counterattack and attack the top 10. At this moment, the battle outside of Earth was coming to an end. Following the death of the Nanming mythical fire sparrow, almost no one was willing to fight to the death here. It really wasn't worth it. This woman had said from the beginning that they were the ones who forced her to attack. They were purely courting death. Everyone, I'll take my leave first. With a swoosh, a powerhouse among the cosmic pirates ran away and disappeared without a trace. Everyone, the mountains will never change, and the rivers will always flow. Farewell. I feel that the meaning of life isn't here. I'll go far away to pursue the true meaning of evolution. Someone said. His face wasn't red and his heart wasn't beating fast. He was fairly natural and escaped in a very artistic manner. The starry sky is so bright and beautiful, yet you and I are fighting here endlessly. What a killjoy. I'm going. Someone ran away without looking back. Everyone. The people watching the live broadcast were speechless. It turned out that heaven illuminators also had times when they were afraid. They were actually escaping at the speed of light. Even the heaven illuminators who were running away were speechless. Damn it, coward. Why did he run? Some experts cursed in secret and cursed. But in the end, he, a powerhouse, also ran away. Everyone else had fled, but he didn't dare to stay. Otherwise, he would be smashed by the 2 silver doors and turned into a bloody pulp. It was too miserable. Some people were bitter and resentful because they reckoned that if everyone present joined forces, they could destroy this woman no matter how powerful she was. There was nothing that could be done. They weren't of the same mind and didn't come from the same clan. They were all on guard against each other, so who would be willing to start a war with a terrifying woman that they could originally avoid? Therefore, in the blink of an eye, the people in outer space had all escaped. Each of them ran faster than the last, and many of them had almost disappeared in an instant. However, what shocked some people was that this woman was too domineering. She actually didn't stop and continued to chase after him. Even the older generation experts, all of them revered themselves as ancestors for many years, put down their pride and began to compete to see who could escape the fastest. As long as they were a bit faster than others, it was fine. Whoever fell behind would be the unlucky one. Boom. In the end, the moment the woman stopped, she smashed the silver doorboard. Some people were currently piercing through the starry sky, wishing to directly cross the cosmos and completely disappear, but in the end they were extremely unlucky. For example, the ancestor of the sky piercer had always kept a low profile and refused to stand out after coming to Earth. He had always been observing and looking for opportunities in the dark. However, he had actually been targeted. This was because he was an assassin, a dark hunter. Although he had been dormant before, the crazy killing intent in the depths of his heart had always existed. He hated everything on this planet, and it was actually sensed by the woman condensed from spiritual power. Clang! He used the Skypiercer's precious blood sword to block it. In a split second, a section of the divine sword that was scarlet like magma broke. Earlier on, Yao Yao's grandfather had smashed a section of it with the big cauldron. Now, another section was destroyed. This made his heart bleed. Moreover, the matter wasn't over yet. He was horrified to discover that after the silver door smashed into the wormhole, it slammed onto his body, causing the old assassin to scream miserably on the spot. In the end, the scarlet remnant sword emitted a glaring light and disappeared with a small part of his body, leaving behind a large expanse of bloody mist. At the same time, the ancestor of the Netherworld race was also groaning and roaring furiously. His mount, the Bone Dragon, had been killed. At this moment, he was also suffering the bombardment of the other silver door. He was smashed into the distance and exploded on the spot. The last mass of blood essence wrapped around his soul as he tore open the cosmos and fled in a sorry state. The battle outside Earth had ended. This woman carried the 2 silver doors back to the abyss of Kunlun and disappeared. For a long time, there was silence in the starry skies. The outcome of this battle was too shocking. The group of powerhouses had all run away, one faster than the other. It really made people speechless. Of course, people also knew that they were intentionally avoiding and not willing to fight to the death. They weren't truly fleeing in panic. Soon after, a storm swept through the cosmos. Every race was discussing spiritedly. Could Earth still be seen as a declining land? They definitely couldn't look down on it as they wished. 3 heaven illuminators had actually appeared on this ancient planet. Once 3 or 4 of such characters appeared, they would be on par with the deity race and the netherworld race. In addition to the demon ancestors' cauldron, a supreme treasure that could rival the top 10 weapons in the cosmos, it was as if a super race was rising and recovering. The origin of life that was once ranked 11th in the cosmos is going to completely return. This is simply replacing the deity race. Under the starry skies, every race was shaken. Nothing was more convincing than a true battle record. There wasn't a single evolver who wasn't shaken. Finally, the relevant evaluation departments of ancient and top-notch corporations like the Black Blood Arena and the Wormhole Express Company gave Earth a brand new rating. The most conservative estimate of Earth's true strength is within the top 20. Perhaps it can be ranked within the top 18. This was simply soaring in a straight line. The 2 organizations gave a brand new evaluation and upgraded the grade. This was still because Earth was in an era where the younger generation was lacking in succession and there was a gap in evolvers. Otherwise, if there were a large number of evolvers at the Golden Arhat level, with quite a few quasi-saints and some ancient saints, they would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the top 10. Their evaluation was relatively rigorous. At the same time, they themselves said that perhaps it was too conservative. Otherwise, Earth's ranking would be even higher. Of course, the evaluation agencies of these 2 organizations were also convincing. They gave their opinions that Yao Yao's grandfather's condition couldn't be guaranteed, and the mysterious woman was suspected to be just a passerby who didn't necessarily belong to Earth. They also took these uncertain factors into account. Otherwise, it would seriously impact people's vision just by looking at Earth's most glorious moment. After all, they had even crippled the deity race. At this moment, the Sage Master quietly left Earth to support Uncle Ming and the others. He was afraid that something would happen to them. After all, a group of heaven illuminators had just run away shamelessly in a competition just now. All of them had retreated. There was a Sage Master who quietly entered the starry sky and immediately had a great guarantee. He was carrying the demon ancestors' big cauldron. In reality, there was something the Sage Master hadn't thought of. That group of powerhouses who had fled like a swarm of bees was much more tenacious than he had imagined. They weren't truly fleeing in disorder, but they were temporarily avoiding the edge of that woman who had nothing to do with Earth. In the end, a considerable number of people came back again. They stood in the solar system and stared at Earth. They were truly unreconciled. That woman disappeared from Kunlun. She should be hibernating and sleeping again. We'll be fine as long as we don't provoke her. How hateful! If you provoke me, I'll smash this planet with a slap and draw out the purgatory to swallow all of them. Old friend, don't be impatient. If you really let the purgatory come into being, it'll be a monstrous disaster. The entire universe will be in great trouble. Haven't you read the records on the unearthed prehistoric stone tablets? Our universe used to have yang qi, but because of the purgatory disaster, sigh. The eyes of a group of people outside Earth flickered indeterminately. This old man is really angry. An old man couldn't hold it in any longer. He stretched out a large hand and really wanted to slap it into Earth. Stop, don't act recklessly. Immediately, a few people dissuaded him. Don't stop me, let me vent my anger. That old man snorted angrily. However, he didn't dare to use force to press down with his palm. Instead, he pressed down very slowly and lightly. Everyone was speechless. They could see that he didn't dare and was only venting. However, there were still people who dissuaded him. "Tao friend, you should be more cautious. Don't really smash down with your palm and provoke a great disaster." That old man really couldn't get out of this embarrassing situation. In the end, his face turned red and he said, "It's fine, I know what I'm doing." As he spoke, that palm swayed again and again but didn't dare to descend. This made the others even more amused. He flew into a rage out of humiliation and said, "What are you laughing at? Do you really think I don't dare?" He fumbled around for a long time before he finally stretched out a hand and shrank it into earth. "Tao friend, be careful. Tao friend, you really dare to act recklessly?" The old man was sullen and said, "I'm not attacking Kunlun. I'm just changing a place to vent my anger." He searched for a long time and found a large desert in the western region of Tibet on Earth. He pressed his palm down because he felt that there shouldn't be any mysterious cave residences in such a desolate place. It was the safest. In reality, he was only pretending to be angry. The real situation was a bit of a bad taste. If he brought it up in the future, he could argue with others. Everyone else had been scared off, but he was the only one who dared to slap Earth. However, a strange phenomenon occurred when his shrunken palm approached the golden desert. There were red spider lilies everywhere. They were sparkling and beautiful like a vast ocean. This was truly a great change in the blink of an eye. Just now, it was a barren desert devoid of vitality. In the end, as soon as his palm approached, the red spider lilies immediately bloomed and a blue mist filled the air. His palm immediately froze in midair because he felt something was wrong. That was because this scene felt familiar no matter how he looked at it. It seemed to conform to a certain legend. Very soon, he became alert and his hair stood on end. "Goddamn it, what did I do? I provoked a field of blue-red spider lilies. Isn't this the flower of death in the universe back then? It's accompanied by a terrifying legend." The old man wanted to curse and slap himself even more. His palm quickly retreated and was about to be put away. "Tao friend, please forgive me for not going out to meet you." A calm voice came from the field of blue-red spider lilies swaying in the desert. Now, not to mention the person who wanted to slap him just now, even the others were cursing. This was really like seeing a ghost. When did a certain ruthless stubble from the legends who might have fallen come to Earth? Outside of Earth, many of the heaven illuminators who had returned here looked as if they had eaten a dead child. Their expressions were extremely unsightly, and they felt incomparably uncomfortable. These people really didn't know what to say. This was simply like seeing a ghost. They had actually provoked another great demon on this planet. "Tao friend, do you think I'm easy to bully? Do you want to start a war with me?" A voice came from among the blue-red spider lilies in the desert. In the outer realms, the heaven illuminators were speechless. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.